meeting of the Select Board of the Town of Danvers. And if we may, we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Maureen, would you be
Thank you,
kind
Mr.
enough?
Chairman. Yep. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we begin, as was done by the town moderator last night, we would like to acknowledge the Danvers Police Department, Fire Department, and the other safety officials, including state police and some other assistants, because we had a shooting in Danvers yesterday at a mobile home park, and the victim was taken to a Boston hospital, and we don't know her condition, but the shooter is in jail, and the Danvers Police and Fire did a great job, assisted by some other people. So thank you to our first responders. And next, call for the minute.
Approval of the minutes of January 16, 2024.
So moved as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That is a vote. Thank you. And the next thing on the agenda will be public comment, limited to 2 minutes, please, for any item that is not on the agenda that a citizen wishes to bring to the attention of the board. Hearing none. The next item is going to be an added agenda item at the prerogative of the chair, which is me, and that is to attend to the issue of the closing of the town meeting last night. And our town moderator is in the room if she would care to speak to the issue with no embarrassment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your kind introduction. I'm Pat Fraser. I am the town moderator. At the close of last night's town meeting, I neglected to ask for a motion to adjourn. It was my oversight. It is my mistake. However, that leaves us in a quandary that the meeting was not formally adjourned, and we need to take care of that. I think what happened in the sequence was I was fully expecting a request for a point of order to begin a standing vote, and that didn't occur. And I think I was just so surprised that didn't occur that I was ready and moving on. So I apologize to the board, and I apologize to my town meeting members that we are now in a situation where we must reconvene the town meeting for the purpose of adjourning it. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize my mistake last night. I left. I went home. I thought about it. I researched it. And as the town manager will tell you, I was on the phone with him first thing this morning, and we consulted with legal counsel, who agreed that, indeed, we need to remedy this situation. So again, I deeply, deeply apologize for my oversight.
Well, I was the town moderator for 3 years, and I should have known better. And in the town meeting, 75 of our members have been members for a long time, and so nobody else spoke up and noticed things, so I don't think you should take all the heat, Pat. Okay? That being said, let me see. We have discussions with the town council today, and I have had discussions with the town manager. And Steve, would you like to take it from here to make a suggestion for the convening of a town meeting, special town meeting continuation on February 26th?
I would, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would recommend two things. First would be that the board, that a motion be made to add this agenda item, and that needs to be voted on. Open meeting law says that items can be added to agendas within 48 hours of a posted meeting if the item to be discussed could reasonably not have been anticipated at the time of posting, and certainly the conclusion of last night's town meeting fits squarely within the criteria for items that can be discussed by a majority vote of this board. So if
I would make a motion that we add this to the agenda for tonight for discussion.
I'll
Thank you,
second the
Dan.
motion.
And a second. Do we need a roll call on this? Does-
It wouldn't hurt.
this is all uncharted water, so let's,
Yeah,
Wouldn't hurt.
We're on the side of caution.
I don't know.
I would say do the roll call.
Do a roll call?
Sure.
Mr. Duggan?
Can you just repeat the motion?
yeah, let
please?
me
I'm
explain. So
confused.
there are two, I probably should have explained both parts. As the town moderator alluded to, we were on the phone this morning with town council, as well as a partner in the firm who specializes in town meeting law. And the opinion of Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, Lahane, specifically John Flynn, who actually used to work at the Danvers town meeting prior to David DeLuca being the town attorney. He was the lawyer in the firm who represented the town, is of the opinion that there's no such thing as what he described as constructive dissolution. So there's a term in law, constructive approval, and an example of that would be if there's a permit before a planning board or a regulatory board and that board fails to act within the allotted time, it's an automatic approval. The inverse of that would be constructive dissolution, and they're aware of no instances where a meeting, specifically a town meeting, because you don't need to have a vote to adjourn a meeting like a select board meeting, but town meetings have to be adjourned. Well, more specifically, they have to be dissolved. Adjournment means postpone. A meeting has to be dissolved because votes of town meeting don't become binding until 5 days after the dissolution of a town meeting. So the opinion of council is there must be a vote to dissolve the town meeting that started last night. Technically, we're in recess right now. So the first request of this board is to vote to put on this agenda a discussion about setting a time and date for concluding last night's town meeting, which technically is still open. And if there's support to have that conversation, I can explain a little bit more detail in terms of what we learned
Well,
today.
there's a motion and a second. Matt, did you have other
No,
questions?
I will vote in support of the motion.
Thank you. Maureen?
I will too.
Well, wait a minute. You're supposed to be taking the roll, not me.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Okay. Count me in.
You are the chair.
Yeah, okay, count me in.
We'll do roll call. Matthew Duggan,
Yes.
Maureen Bernard,
Yes.
Gardner Trask,
Yes.
Dan Bennett,
Yes.
David Mills.
Yes.
It's
Okay.
5-0.
Okay, so the agenda item then is,
Would I,
You
so
suggested,
in the email that I
Steve-
sent it, and I apologize for the lateness of the email, I was consulting with town council most of the day just to make sure that I had a clear understanding of what their recommendation was. So, as I noted in the email that I sent the board at 5:36, the request is to discuss reconvening the February 5th, 24 special town meeting for the purpose of voting to dissolve the town meeting, which was the action that was not taken last night. There were 10 articles on the agenda. Votes were taken for the 10 articles. As the moderator mentioned a few minutes ago, those votes were not in question. At the conclusion of the meeting, she declared the meeting closed, suggested everybody drive safe on their way home. Moments after the meeting ended, a town meeting member raised the point of order that a vote to adjourn had not occurred. The immediate thought in discussing it last night with town council was the moderator having declared the meeting over and having nobody raise a point of order, the meeting was over. It was today on the phone with the attorney when John Flynn got involved and said, technically, you need to have a vote to adjourn a town meeting. So the recommendation from council is that this board set a date and time to do that, and I can make a recommendation. What John Flynn has said is that the first motion before that body will be a vote to dissolve the town meeting because the business was complete. If there's if that motion is seconded and voted in the majority, then everybody goes home and has dinner. If that motion fails, then items that had been previously voted on can be reconsidered with a 2/3 vote. So the two options really, my recommendation would be that we look at Monday, February 26th. That is a date that the town attorney is available. But really, it's at the direction of this board. This board called for the special town meeting last night. It's their warrant. the meeting's in recess, and it's really the discretion of this board as to when they want to reconvene to conclude the business of the town meeting.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go
for
ahead.
the sake of starting the discussion, I move that the board reconvene the February 5th special town meeting on Monday, February 26th at 7:30 for the purpose of dissolving said February 5th town meeting.
Thank you. There's
Mr.
a
Chairman, if I may, I have a number of questions
Sure,
before we make a motion.
okay.
Jump right in with both feet. Do we need a quorum for this special date and time, and what is that number?
75 is the quorum for a town.
75, thank you. And what is the cost of running a meeting?
For a typical special town meeting, where you're scheduling select board hearing dates, finance committee hearing dates.
No, the simple, what's it gonna cost us
Yeah,
to
well,
reconvene?
The short answer is I don't know, because this is
Okay,
be a very.
question, thank you.
May I?
Go
just to
ahead.
finish?
Yep.
In a typical town meeting, we're printing the warrants, or there are multiple mailings. In this case, it would probably be a letter to town meeting members saying, here's the time and date of the town meeting. So it would be certainly less expensive than a normal town meeting, but there will be costs. There will be custodial fees and that sort of thing.
Okay. The 35 folks that were absent, will they be allowed to attend and vote? They weren't at the original meeting.
That is a question I can follow up with council on. I don't have an answer off the top of my head.
Is there anything that we took, any of the business that we took care of, is there anything that can wait 3 months to be enacted before they have to be, in other words, can they wait 3 months for what we voted on? Is there anything pressing?
I'm not sure I can answer yes or no on all the items. For example, the request from the property owner for the easement, I wouldn't answer that on behalf of the property owner, but in terms of the unpaid bills or the opioid settlement funds, pool fencing, none of those are urgent necessarily.
Well, the easement, that encroachment's been there for 200 years, so I don't think another 3 months will make a difference. If we looked at Robert's rules as a guide, it's certainly appropriate to wait till our next annual meeting to convene in the beginning to conclude the special town meeting. There's nothing to prevent us, not that Robert's rules is the final say, but it is appropriate under Robert's rules to wait till the next meeting that we convene to finish the business.
Can I suggest there might be an issue, a concern with that? To your point about the people who weren't there, can they vote? Certainly a good question, and should they be there? But if we have an election in between, and a third of the town meeting members potentially could be changed, can the new town meeting members vote on a meeting they weren't participating if it's a brand-new town meeting member?
I didn't go any further into Robert's rules to
No,
to
I
find that
understand.
answer, but
So,
things change. Somebody could resign between now and February 26th.
True
And
enough.
actually, the gentleman it was his last meeting, will he come back?
well, that's a good question, but I think that it is further, if we wait, we are further opening up the can of worms that a third of the town meeting members may have changed, and potentially. And then we get into a different legal issue that I don't think has been anticipated before. This is a unique, and we're traveling down new paths. My
Dan-
preference is to bring back the existing town meeting who were there last night, allow them to dissolve, because they were the parties to the votes that were taken, and finish that up and get it done and over with cleanly. And then elections happen, and the next town meeting is its own animal.
And my preference, I don't think we can, well, can we get 75 people out? We're going to ask our town meeting members to come back in 2 weeks. Hopefully, we can get to 75. I can't guarantee that, neither can you.
Dan, my sense is, Gardner's point is well taken. The vote to dissolve, or whatever the vote needs to be, could not be made by people who were not at the meeting. I don't have a statute, or my sense is,
It makes sense, but not everything makes sense in government.
I know, and that's why I don't practice law anymore. Yeah, I think that I think it makes sense to go forward and to seek the assistance of the town meeting members to resolve it.
If I may,
So-
Mr. Chairman,
And by the way, I just want to add, John Flynn, the specialist now at that law firm, he was the lawyer for the town when I was the town moderator, and he was brilliant then, and a very, very qualified lawyer. So his sense of it, I also trust a lot.
Well, there's no doubting the fact that we have to reconvene at some set time.
Yep.
That's a given, to solve the problem.
If I may, since the meeting has started, I received a draft opinion from David DeLuca, the town attorney.
Okay.
He and I spoke this morning. I think it's not terribly long, and I think it would probably be helpful for me to just read it
Please
so
do.
that the board can hear it together. Dated today, shortly after the conclusion of the February 5th special town meeting, several town meeting members alleged that no motion was made to dissolve the special town meeting. Upon review, following completed vote on warrant Article 10, the town moderator stated, quote, "That concludes our town meeting. Thank you very much and have safe travels home," end quote. There were no objections made or point of orders raised at that point. And he cites that this is available on DCAT. We have considered whether the town moderator's words and subsequent actions by town meeting members constituted an actual or constructive dissolution of the town meeting. However, we have found no authority to suggest that town meeting can dissolve, other than by a motion and vote of town meeting. Accordingly, the special town meeting, February 5th, remains open and must be reconvened in order to be dissolved to give effect to items voted by the February 5th special town meeting. To formally dissolve special town meeting, a motion and vote to dissolve must be taken at either the start of the May annual town meeting or at a town meeting at some date prior to May. However, the option to delay dissolution until the May town meeting is not favored by David DeLuca here for two reasons. First, the special town meeting should be formally dissolved as early as possible to activate compliance with certain statutory obligations, including the MBTA Communities Act, and to ensure prompt action on warrant articles which were voted in the affirmative on February 5th. There is urgency to preserve the current town meeting membership and to achieve a vote to conclude the special town meeting before the next annual election, and thus avoid new town meeting membership voting old business. Therefore, I recommend reconvening another night of special town meeting as soon as possible for the sole purpose of dissolving the February 5th special town meeting. To do so, another warrant is unnecessary. The warrant has already been posted for this special town meeting. Notice of the reconvening should be posted in accordance with bylaw. At a reconvening of special town meeting, a quorum is required to reconvene to conduct additional business, but not required in order to dissolve. Since the meeting cannot, and he's citing law here, I'll read it. Since the meeting cannot take any action in the absence of a quorum except to adjourn to another time or to take a recess or, in the discretion of the moderator, when not prevented by a bylaw, to dissolve. In other words, we need 75 to call the meeting, but only a majority of those present to dissolve the meeting. Section 3 of Chapter 2 of the Danvers bylaw prevents dissolution until every article of the warrant has been considered and acted upon, which it has here. It is undisputed that Article 10 was fully considered and acted upon, leaving dissolution as a final motion to be acted on. A motion to dissolve should be requested as the first and only business upon reconvening the special town meeting. A motion to dissolve takes precedence over any other motion and must be acted on first. See town meeting time, Section 61. The motion to dissolve requires a second, is not debatable or amendable, requires a majority vote, and may not be reconsidered. Again, see town meeting time, Section 61. If the motion to dissolve does not pass, the town meeting would continue from the point of the completion of the vote on warrant Article 10. The vote on Article 10 is considered complete. From the evidence presented, there was no timely request for alternative vote procedures, roll call vote, or standing vote, and the moderator declared the meeting concluded. In the absence of any further motions, such a motion for reconsideration of any article, which requires a two-third vote, there would be no further business for the special town meeting. Again, see bylaws of the Town of Danvers, Chapter 2, Section 4. And I just received that at 6:30, so I apologize that I wasn't able to share that ahead of time.
Mr. Chairman, if I may make comment?
Yes, Dan.
Everything in that letter, it makes sense. We just need to set a date and a time. The MBTA thing is not necessary. We don't have to pass that and get it approved to the end of the year. So another 3 months makes no difference on that. There's nothing that we voted on that needs to be enacted or reacted to
Okay.
before May. It's just a question, do we need to bring out the folks for a special town meeting February 26th rather than wait till May 1st and accomplish the same thing? It just makes no sense to me to,
My concern is that I think that any new town meeting members would not be qualified to vote on something that they weren't present for. And so
so that answers the question, the 35 that weren't at the meeting the other night can't vote?
I don't think so.
So I'm going to go with that presumption, that 116 people, so the quorum was 116. That was the
I just want to clear, there was nothing in the opinion that said that the town meeting members who weren't present at the town meeting last night would be precluded from participating. Town meeting members can come late and leave early from any town meeting.
Right, and
So
that's what,
I didn't hear in the opinion that if a member who was not present last night attended the reconvening, it would have the same effect as coming late to the meeting and participating.
so it would have no effect if there's an election.
No, it would. Those people, those were not people who were elected to that and heard or were town meeting members at the time of the town meeting. I'm suggesting if 48 people, that's how many people are up for election, actually 40.
Well, it's
50.
conjecture, it's conjecture. You're playing with
No,
numbers.
well, no,
And
but
it
I'm
doesn't mean
playing with,
anything.
it does if they can't vote. If they can't vote,
Well,
then
then they
you've
can't
just cut,
vote.
but then you've cut that down and you, again, need a quorum. So your 75 is tighter, your opportunity to get 75 is better now before the election than after the election.
I think that makes sense to me. I still don't have a specific law or statute.
And people understand, an error happened. Everybody makes mistakes.
That's not the
I
issue.
get it, and people will come out. They're dedicated town meeting members. They'll come out for a 15 or 20-minute meeting to dissolve. It was an error that we've never encountered before, and frankly, I'd like the clarity of finishing up with the existing town meeting members who were voted for that period of time should happen.
And just to be clear, I just want to reread what Mr. DeLuca said about, he said, urgency to preserve the current town meeting membership and achieve a vote to conclude before the next election and thus avoid new town meeting membership voting old business. So new town meeting members would be eligible to participate in the vote. He's not saying town meeting members are ever precluded from participating. If they're a duly elected town meeting member, they can vote at a town meeting. What's novel is the notion that a town meeting was opened, paused, an election takes place, and then concluded. It's not saying that's not permissive, it's just unusual. So I'd be careful. I think town meeting members can participate whether the meeting is with people who didn't come last night and come next week, or people who are elected and then participate.
Right, and certainly if it's an open town meeting rather than representative, and it was a second night,
Correct.
people would come and vote.
Correct.
The difference here is we have elected representative town meeting members that were not there when the roll call was taken. I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Dan. Gardner, would you,
Well, so it's always been kind of a dicey whether we have discussion and then a motion or motion and a discussion. I made a motion, but you wanted to have discussion. I think the other members should weigh in on their
Oh, sure.
thoughts too.
It's up to the chair.
sure, that's okay. Matt, do you want to speak to the comments that have come from this end of the table?
Sure, I think I heard at least one person mentioned
And
postponement.
Matt, could you speak closer to the?
Yep, sure. Sorry about that. So I heard someone down at the other end, I think, mentioned postponing until the May annual town meeting, and that may be preferable if it has no impact on the articles that were voted on last night. It seems like it would be a logistical challenge, I think, to get a quorum for this one item. So, but I would be willing to
Move it forward to May.
well, I would be willing to do February 26th if it was necessary. I really have no qualms with that.
Okay, thank
But
you.
whatever is necessary, I think it needs to be addressed one way or the other.
I don't want to discount the town council's. I'm just drawing on my experience with legal bodies, and I was on the State Ethics Commission for 5 years as a volunteer, and we had a lot of business. And if somebody could not attend one of the meetings, they were precluded from taking a vote on whatever was discussed at that meeting. As far as when I sat in a court for 11 years, the question never came up because the people who sat on the court and listened to it were the ones that made the decision. But my sense is, if you weren't there to hear the debate, you can't be part of the decision to up or down on the debate. I think the town council is saying something different, and I respect our town council, certainly John Flynn, but I think there's a problem if we don't go forward sooner, on the 26th or some other date that can be agreed upon. Mo, did you want to?
I don't know. I'm thinking, I understand what Select Board Member Bennett says, that people don't want to come out. I think the month of February is sometimes hard, for people. I don't want to incur cost for the town, so I would probably wait till the May meeting.
Okay.
That's what I would do.
We have one either.
We haven't voted, there's been no second on the
I'm
motion.
just kind of
Okay.
counting in my own head. Is there a second to Gardner's motion?
So I made the motion that we reconvene on February 26th.
I'll second the motion. Now, discussion on that motion.
Again, my concern is primarily with the change. If a election were to happen, it just throws us into a whole different world of who can, who can't. And I'd rather cleanly end this. There's no question, isn't it? It's not going to be a debate on any of the articles. That's not what it's for. And I think town meeting members are willing to say, we understand a mistake was made, and we'll be happy to give 15 more minutes of our time to this effort.
Dan, other comments?
None.
Matt, do you have other comments?
No, I'll do either the 26th of this month or wait until May. It doesn't.
Thank you. And Maureen?
I'll wait till May. Dan, I want to let you know that on the 26th, we have a Kiwanis, the governor's
I
here.
know that,
So I just wanted to remind you of that, the dinner. So
I know that. I'll have
Kiwanis
to come with
governor.
my red jacket.
So,
Okay. I believe that if we wait till May, we are opening up a possibility of a very serious court appeal if someone wants to challenge it, with new members being able to vote on old business. And so for that reason, I support the 26th or some other earlier convenient date, but the 26th is on the table, and so that is the motion, and there is a second. And I think it's time to take a vote on the motion. Roll call?
I would say so.
Yeah,
And I'm going to support the motion because, let's get it over with.
thank you, Dan.
But I still feel we could have waited till May, but that's okay.
Matt, on the motion, excuse me, Kathy, call the roll. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Matthew Duggan,
Yes.
Maureen Bernard,
no.
Gardner Trask,
Yes.
Dan Bennett,
Yes.
David Mills,
Yes, thank you, it is a vote.
4-1.
Okay. So, Pat, thank you for being here.
I'll see you on the 26th.
Okay, Kathy, the next agenda item, please.
The board is in receipt of an application from Deep Mary Beth Very, event coordinator, for a charity wine pouring license on Thursday, March 14, 2024, from 6 to 9 p.m. at Danversport, 161 Elliott Street.
Welcome, Mary Beth.
Thank you, David. I'd just like to thank the board for allowing me to come here this evening. I'm Mary Beth Berry, the current president of DEEP, the Danvers Education Enrichment Partnership. I'm here today because I'm applying for a charity wine pouring license for the annual DEEP wine and food tasting that will be taking place on March 14th, Thursday, at the Danversport Yacht Club from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. This is the 23rd year that DEEP's been doing this. Proceeds from this event go and support the teacher grants that we give to Danvers teachers every year. We give anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000 to help support the curriculum in the public schools. We are partnering with Merchants Liquor Mart. They've been the provider the last 23 years to bring in, they'll be bringing in their wines for tastings. We are at the Danversport Yacht Club, so the Yacht Club is in favor of us and merchants bringing the wine in. The servers of the wine are tip certified. And tickets are on sale now for $45. It's a 21 plus event. We'll also have food vendors there that will be providing samples of their, some of their top offerings from their restaurants. And there'll be other opportunities for people to donate throughout the night. So with that, any questions?
Thank you, Mary Beth. There may be some questions.
Sure.
Is this a public hearing?
No.
No, okay. Any members of the board have questions or comments to Mary Beth? Matt?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've attended this event several times in the past. It's professionally run. It's well attended. It's for a good cause. So Mary Beth, I wish you success to you and your team for continuing in that vein.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Maureen?
I also attended this too, and I'll be planning to attend it again, and I think you do a great job, Mary Beth. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you, Maureen. Dan?
As a past president of DEEP and having run a couple of wine tastings, one time it was when the World Series and the Red Sox were there, and at 8 o'clock everybody left.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did it once in, I think it was May. 51 people came. The school was all but done. So good luck to you in March. I just put it in my calendar. Thank
Excellent.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Gardner?
I've also attended times in the past, and knowing that Danversport, who is the host and servers, I don't have to ask my normal questions about tip certification. I'm comfortable, so thank you.
Thank you, Gardner. So hearing no other further questions or comments, all in favor?
Aye.
Can we have a motion?
Okay, we need a motion.
Thank you. I make a motion that we approve the application from DEEP for the wine tasting March 14th, 6 to 9 at Danversport.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It is a vote. Thank you, Mary
Very
Beth.
good. Thank you.
Good luck.
The board will hear a request from representatives of Falcon Fest for a street closure on June 25th, 5 to 8 p.m., with a rain date of June 27, 2024.
Do we have a representative from Falcon Fest? Here we are. Can you please go to the podium and identify yourself and speak into the microphone?
Good evening. My name is Amy Ciancarelli, and I'm the interim president of Danvers Falcon Fest. Thank you for having us again tonight. I'm with my esteemed colleagues.
Dave Pabish, secretary of the board, Falcon Fest.
Good evening, Rebecca Franke, treasurer.
We are here this evening to talk about Downtown Rewind. This will be our second annual event, and we are seeking a block party permission. The event is proposed for Tuesday, June 25th, with a rain date of Thursday, June 27th, from 5 to 8 p.m. We are seeking street closure at 3 p.m. on Maple Street from Locust to Elm. We also will need the CVS lot closed off at 2 p.m. And we want to, of course, leave everything nice and clean and tidy after the event. So from 8 to 9, we'll be cleaning up downtown. Last year's event was a big hit. We had approximately 2,000 attendees. It featured live music by the band Joppa Flats. We had kids activities. We had downtown food vendors, giving out some nice samples and having deals. What else am I missing? Oh, we had a car show, an antique car show, performances by local spots like Danvers the Dance Center of Danvers. We've been working with the town and the town manager's office. Jen Breaker is actually our point person in terms of negotiating things with the police, fire, DPW. So we expect another organized, really fun event to bring our community together.
Thank you, Amy. If you could just stay there, there may be some
Of course.
questions or comments from members of the board. Matt, you want to start?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've been involved with Oldies Night, the previous kind of iteration of this event, and I'm familiar with street closures. For last year, did you have the same street closure all the way to Locust, or is that new this year?
That's new this year. Thank you for that question. We'd like to extend to Locust because the Vintage Car Show was a big hit, and we'd like some more space to have more cars.
Sure. So previously, the street closure was to Cherry Street. So eastbound traffic on Maple had the option of either turning left onto School or right onto Cherry Street to kind of, detour around the event. But now it's to Locust. So that's more of a challenge in my mind that, for example, inbound traffic on Locust will be forced to go straight down Hobart Street, and then eastbound on Maple would have to also do the same thing. So have you discussed the impact of that with the police department, and will there be a detail police officer at that intersection?
Yes, so we meet monthly with the town. That includes Jen, that includes the chiefs of fire and police, and also key DPW personnel. We have discussed this and proposed the changes to the street closures. We don't seem to have any issues. We can certainly review again, but we do have sort of our marching orders of what is required, and I have in front of me the memo that was sent to you on February 1st, which includes 4 police officers at the event.
Right.
So I feel as though we're comfortable with blocking off the right roads and keeping everybody safe.
Okay. Yeah, I would expect that there would be some type of signage like further down, like at the 4-way stop at Pickering somehow, because that will be a major choke point, I would think.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, that's really the only concern I have, and I wish you success and great weather for the event.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Maureen?
Hi, Amy and group. I think it's well thought of, well put together. I love how the communication with all the departments in the town. At the end, after everybody has questions, maybe you can tell people how they could help you with fundraising.
Sure.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Dan?
Thank you. Amy, just to pick up on what Matt said, going down to Locust, the red line doesn't seem to go into the intersection and actually meet up with Locust Street. So are you blocking off Locust Street, Maple Street at Maple Square?
So I'm a landmark person. I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett. We expect by Gibbs at the end there up to where the Christmas tree is lit.
So the beginning of Gibbs, or the end
Correct.
at Gibbs,
Yes.
across from the mobile.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if we blocked it off at Loomis. Is that the name of that little side street, Mr. Manager?
Yes.
Loomis. By
that-
the pizza place.
Okay, we were thinking Western Cycle. Gotcha.
Yeah, right, and that
Yep.
pizza place in Western Cycle, just so not to interfere with the traffic, but then I can see where somebody might want to take a right-hand turn and find they can't go anywheres. So is the red line where the stop is on the map. People will be able to get through Locust.
Yes,
Maple.
I'm looking at my friend David Lane here, who's been part of these
David, your
meetings.
friends? Okay, that's just my only concern. It's going to be tough for people anyways, but if they can get through that intersection, then that would be fine. Okay,
Noted. Thank you.
that's okay. Put it in my calendar, by the way, so we're all set.
You know, we didn't see you last time. Did you sneak by us?
Last time,
Last year, we didn't see you.
you didn't see me on stage giving an award to Rotary?
No. No.
I guess I wasn't there, but I was. I gave an award to Rotary
Yes.
at
I'm
the
being fresh.
intermission. I got a piece
Yes.
of cake from Rotary.
Okay. Stop by our tent this time.
Okay. I walked by, I was too busy.
That's what happens.
All right, Amy.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Gardner?
Being one of the last of the Danvers Family Festival board members, I am so happy that you've taken up the mantle and run with it. I like the new projects you're doing. I have some ideas. I'll get in touch with you. I couldn't make it last year. My band was busy elsewhere, so I'm sorry I missed it. But I put it in my calendar and hope not to miss it this year. So every bit of luck with the event. I'm very happy for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gardner. Any further discussion from board members?
If I may, Mr. Mills,
Please, Amy.
we also have a banner application for this event.
Is that on the agenda, Kathy?
Yeah, it's on.
That's on the consent
On the
calendar.
consent calendar. It'll be
Okay.
dealt with.
Separately, my
It'll
apologies.
It'll be like automatic. Okay, hearing no further comments, all in favor of the?
Motion,
Motion?
a motion
I think I
to
thought there was a motion.
approve the request from Falcon Fest for the street closures on June 25th, rain date, June 27th.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second?
Second.
Several seconds. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is a vote. Amy and David and Rebecca, thanks for coming in, and good luck with this wonderful, wonderful community
Thank
building
you.
thing that you are going to do for us all.
Thank
Good
you.
night. You can stay around for the consent calendar if you want.
We actually have a board meeting.
Oh, okay.
Busy people.
The board will hear a report from the town's independent auditor for fiscal year 2023.
Well, while the auditor is making his way to the microphone, Mr. Chairman, the board received copies of the independent audit at the last meeting. We wanted to provide that a few weeks out. We are joined tonight by Zach Fentros with Markham. He is the point person assigned to the town of Danvers by his firm. In the audience tonight, we have three members of our finance team. We have Jill Summit, our treasurer collector, Heather Rousseau, our town accountant, and behind them, Rodney Conley, our director of administration and finance. I like to steal Zach's thunder each year and spoil the news that is yet again a clean audit. But Mr. Fentros is here to cover some highlights and take any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Steve. As Steve said, my name is Zach Fentros. I was the audit director in charge of the town of Danvers June 30, 2023 audit. So tonight I'm going to go through the annual comprehensive financial report for you folks. I'm going to highlight some certain account balances and some trends. Before I jump in, I think it's important to kind of have a takeaway or a conclusion from my audit. And the conclusion is that the town is in a good financial position. The town has a good unassigned general fund balance. You have made consistent contributions to your OPEB trust fund. And what we'll do now is we'll jump on in. So I'll have you turn to the first page after the table of contents, or the first page after the table of contents. It's embarrassing. It's actually not the first page after the table of contents. It's page 15. My apologies. And page 15 is the first page of the independent auditor's report. It's essentially what the town hired us to produce. The town received the clean opinion, which is the best opinion you can receive from an independent auditing firm. And it's the same opinion that the town has received in prior years. Next, I'd like to turn to page 19, which is the first page of the management's discussion and analysis. In the management's discussion and analysis takes place on pages 19 through 28. Essentially, this is a narrative summary of the results of operation. And this section also discusses some major financial areas. So instead of simply sitting here and reading this to you, I'd actually like to jump to page page 30, which is the first page of the statement of net position, where we'll talk about the same things on page 30 and some further pages that are talked about here in the management's discussion and analysis. So tonight we're going to be taking a look at two balance sheets. The first balance sheet starts on page 39, and this can be thought of as the long-term financial view for the town of Danvers. As you can see, there are three columns here, and the first column is your governmental activities. That's your general fund, your stabilization funds, your capital project funds, your special revenue funds. They're all consolidated together, and then the town's long-term assets and the town's long-term liabilities are included. And then for your business type activities, that's your water fund, your sewer fund, and then your electric fund. And the breakdown between water, sewer, and electric can be found on pages 38 through 40. We're not going to go there right now. We're going to stay right here on page 30. But just want to let you know that if you wanted to see some further breakdown of those operations, it can be found on pages 38 through page 40. So what I'm going to focus on this balance sheet is kind of the long-term assets and the long-term liabilities. And if we go maybe 2/3 of the way down the page, you'll see there's capital assets. And the very first line item there is non-depreciable capital assets. And that balance is $78,068,000. It's about a $3.7 million increase from the prior year. Now that increase was primarily due to two items. And the first one was $1.75 million was for your landfill capping. And then $1.9 million was spent on the Smith School. Right below that, you have your other capital assets net of accumulated depreciation. And that had a balance of $99,581,000. It's actually about a $3.5 million decrease from the prior year. Now, this decrease is due to your depreciation expense in fiscal year 23 exceeding your additions in fiscal year 23. So you had depreciation expense of about $5.9 million, and then you had current year additions of about $2.4 million, which is why you see that decrease in that number. And some of the major current year additions include $1.2 million for computer hardware over at the school, and then $205,000 for some new police vehicles. If we could turn the page, we'll see the second half of the statement of net position. And on page 31, you'll see the liabilities and the fund balance. And if we go maybe about halfway down the page, it's the very first line item under non-current liabilities. It's called bonds and loans payable net of current portion. And that at a balance is $64,727,000. It's about a $4.4 million decrease from the prior year. Now, this decrease is due to the principal payments the town made on your outstanding debt in fiscal year 23. But the reason I wanted to bring this number to your attention is users of the financial statements, such as your bond rating agencies, like to see between 70 to 75% of debt paid off within 10 years. And as of June 30, 2023, the town is going to be at 62% paid off within the next 10 years for your governmental activities. Now, that's primarily due to the town pushing out or bonding for the new high school over a 25-year period. So that was really the driving force of that ratio. But for your business type activities, it's actually at 88% that's going to be paid off within 10 years, which is a good financial position for those business type activities to be in. The next item I want to bring to your attention is two items right below bonds and loans payable. It is the net pension liability. And that at a balance of $99,578,000. It's actually a fairly significant change from the prior. It's actually an increase of about $28 million from the prior year. Now, what this represents is the town's proportional share of the total unfunded liability for the Danvers Contributory Retirement System. Now, I said that number increased by about $28 million from last year to this year, and that's due to the investment results of the retirement system during calendar year 2022. So this liability is actually being presented as of December 31st, 2022, because your retirement system is on a calendar year, not a fiscal year. So the investment results came in less than what was anticipated by about $37 million for the retirement system during calendar year 2022. Danvers retirement system was not alone in seeing that effect. Retirement systems across the Commonwealth saw very similar results, where the investment results came in much less than what they had anticipated during calendar year 2022, which is why you see that increase in your liability. Right below that is the next item I want to bring to your attention. It is net OPEB liability. And OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. This is essentially the health insurance or the future health insurance for the town of Danvers. And this is one of the biggest changes in in my opinion, it's the biggest change in your financial statements from 22 to 23. and that had a balance of $117,758,000. It's actually about a $103 million decrease from the prior year. So I'll say that again, it's a $103 million decrease from the prior year. Now that decrease is primarily due to two items. The first was a change in your assumptions, and the assumption that changed was your discount rate. Your discount rate went from 2.19 to 5.75, and that decreased your liability by approximately $90 million. Now, that increase in the discount rate was primarily due to the change in the municipal bond rate, which is not uncommon for what we've been seeing with other communities in the Commonwealth. We're seeing some similar trends with the discount rate increasing due to the increase in the municipal bond rate. The other item that led to the decrease in this liability was a difference between expected and actual experience. So the actuaries had assumed that your Medicare supplement payments would be increasing by 14%, when in actuality they only increased by 8%. So that difference between what your actuary had anticipated and then what actually happened led to a decrease in this liability of about $26 million. So those two items together is the primary driving force of that decrease in that liability from last year to this year. And if I could have you turn to page 34, that was the last thing I wanted to kind of go over for your long-term financial view. And on page 34 is the second balance sheet that we're going to look at tonight. So you can see there are 5 columns. The first one is your general fund. That's your general fund plus your stabilization fund. The next is your major town grants fund. After that, we have your major capital project funds. And then you have your non-major governmental funds, which is your special revenue funds, your permanent trust funds, and your expendable trust funds are all consolidated and presented there. And that far right column is just a summation of the prior 4 columns. For tonight, I want to look at just the general fund, and the number that I want to bring to your attention is 3 numbers from the bottom. It's the most important number, in my opinion, in your financial statement. It's your unassigned fund balance. And this is the reason that this is a really important figure in your financial statements. It's really the starting point for the town's free cash calculation. And your unassigned fund balance, as of June 30, 2023, had a balance of $20,444,000. It's actually about a $4.8 million increase from the prior year. Now, that increase is due to a couple factors. So it's primarily due to your positive budgetary results of operation. We're going to get there after this, but your budgetary results of operation were to the good of about $10.6 million. So the town started the year with an unassigned fund balance of about $15.7 million, and it increased by $10.6 million due to your budgetary results of operation during fiscal year 23. But then the town utilized some of that free cash during your budgeting process. In 2023, you utilized $2.7 million of that free cash, and then you utilized an additional $2.7 million in fiscal year 2024 for capital needs, as well as OPEB trust fund contributions. And then additionally, the town utilized $1.1 million for a contribution to your debt education stabilization fund. So again, you started the year with about 15.6. It increased by 10.6 million due to your positive budgetary results of operation. And then you utilize some of that free cash, which is why you see that increase of about $4.8 million in your unassigned fund balance. Before we turn into the budgetary results of operation, the Government Finance Officers Association likes to see this figure when comparing to your expenditures of about 2 months. So what they recommend is 2 months worth of unassigned fund balance in comparison to your expenditures, so about 16.7% when comparing that ratio. And as of June 30, 2023, the town of Danvers was at 17.7%. So that's a little bit above where the GFOA would recommend. The GFOA stands for the Government Finance Officers Association. It's a bit above where the GFOA recommends, so that's a good financial position for the town of Danvers to be in.
And Zach, if I could weigh in at this point for just a second, just to put some of what you just said into context.
Sure.
The unassigned fund balance number this year is very healthy, 17.7%. The policy that the board adopted back prior to, I think, 2016, maybe 2017, was to aim for a range of 8 to 12%. As Mr. As Zach just said, Mr. Fentros, the guidance coming from the GFOA in the past 6 years is now more similar to what you see in like the utility world, where they're looking at months of operation rather than an arbitrary range. And they're saying 2 months of operating cash is what the recommendations are for towns and cities. So in theory, if the policy were updated, we would be in compliance with that recommendation. But I want to note several things about the free cash certification, which drives the unassigned fund balance, which we'll talk about during the budget process. But the $3.5 million of our unassigned fund balance this year is related to the sale of the collection of soil at the landfill. You'll recall that the town borrowed money to cover the operating costs for that project. So that revenue, although right now is being considered unassigned fund balance, is, as we've discussed per policy, slated to be transferred into a special revenue fund to be used as we discussed, well, the debt stabilization fund specifically is what we talked about for the potential public works facility. So the $3.5 million of the $12 million in free cash that was certified this year, which again is part of unassigned fund balance, is related to the landfill soil collection. When you back that off, and then the other piece that is driving the free cash this year are our interest earnings, kudos to Jill Summit, are at historically high, a historically high point right now. We budget conservatively for investment income. Part of the reason for that is over the past 15 years, we have exceeded our investment target 8 times, or maybe 7 times, and we have missed our target 7 or 8 times. So we have a 50, each year we're about 50-50 in hitting our investment income target. So none of the financial team in this room would ever recommend to this board that we should be budgeting investment income at $1.5 million, because 14 out of 15 of the last years we would have failed to meet that target. So those two numbers, the reason I stopped to provide that context, as Zach just said, we have enough fund balance on hand right now to be in compliance with what the GFOA is saying towns and cities should be aiming for. When you account for the investment income that we won't count on next year, and you account for the soil revenue that it needs to be used to pay off the short-term borrowing for that, we're right around 14%, which is where we were last year. So still a good number, but that number's inflated in part this year by those two things.
If we could turn to page 98, I think it's a great illustrative example of what Mr. Bartha was just talking about.
If you were getting there, I apologize, but
It's okay. I'm always fine with people jumping in to provide context. So page 98 is the revenue side of your budgetary versus actual results for your general fund. And if we look at the bottom, the last line item there is your well, excuse me, let me take a quick step back. There are 4 columns here. The first column is your original budget. That second column is your final budget. That third column is the actual revenues that came in during fiscal year 2023. And then that far right column, which is where I want to focus our attention tonight, is that favorable or unfavorable variance when comparing your final budget to the actual revenues that came in during fiscal year 23. If you see that last number on that right-hand side, total revenues came in greater than what the town anticipated by $7,897,000. Now, as Mr. Bartha had mentioned, there were really 2 big driving forces for this. And the first is maybe 2/3 of the way down the page. This is the real large one. It's under miscellaneous. And it's the second line item under miscellaneous. It's other non-recurring. You can see that that had a favorable variance of $3,959,000. That is the soil revenue that Mr. Bartha was talking about that came in during fiscal year 23. And then if you see 2 line items above that, you'll see your investment income. And your investment income had favorable turnbacks of $1,669,000. Again, Danvers is not alone in this. Many communities in the Commonwealth did see an increase in their investment income in the general fund during fiscal year 2023, which led to some very favorable turnbacks on your budgetary versus actual results. But these were the 2 real big driving forces of those of that increase in that unassigned fund balance that I had mentioned previously. And then if we turn to page 100, we'll see the other side of the equation. Page 99 is the start of the expenditure. Page 100 is the second half of it. So page 99 and 100 is the expense side of the equation. So very similarly, you have your original budget, final budget, your actual expenditures, as well as your encumbrances, which is the amounts that are being carried over to the next fiscal year. And then that far right column is your favorable or unfavorable variance when comparing your final budget to the actual amounts. As you can see, that last number on the far right column, which is your total expenditures and other financing uses, had favorable returnbacks of $2,665,000. So this represents the amount of expenditures that came in less than what the town of Danvers had budgeted for during fiscal year 2023. So if you take the expense side plus the revenue side of the equation, that's that $10.6 million that I was referring to earlier, which were the turnbacks on your budgetary versus actual that really helped increase your unassigned fund balance. And that was everything I kind of wanted to bring to your attention here tonight. Is there any questions? I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Steve, before we ask board members, had you comments?
Just the 2 pages that Zach is on now, one of the things I look at each year when I open the audit, on page 100, you look at the final budget versus the variance. So we set a budget a year and a half out for the operations of the town. 2.6 million represents about a 2% variance. So we had positive operating results by about 2% on a $126 million budget on the expense side. And then on the revenue side, as Zach said, on page 98, when you back out the soil revenue, which really isn't general operating revenue, that's dedicated to an expense that we're also incurring, and the investment income, we're about 1.79% off of the revenue target. So this is context that again, this is something I look at because we're setting including electric and water sewer, we're setting a $185 million budget. We're setting that in May and trying to project what we're going to spend through the following June. And we're within 2%. And that's a credit to the departments, that's a credit to the finance team that's putting revenue projections together. I can tell you I certainly don't know at the beginning of a calendar year what my expenses are going to be within 2% at the end of the year. So I want to acknowledge the work of the staff in the room tonight and the staff that's not in the room tonight in managing that process year-round.
Thank you, Steve. Who would like to start? Matt, do you have any questions or comments?
I do. On page 21, please. You mentioned earlier in the presentation about OPEB, and we saw the biggest financial changes in that segment. And you also mentioned that there was a significant increase in the discount rate that kind of was the driver for a dramatic decrease in the OPEB liability. Can you kind of just do a deeper dive? Because there was a significant change, I think, of 114 million in decrease. Can you kind of just explain
Sure.
what the impact of that is?
So your actuary, when they come in, because this liability is determined by an actuary. The town hires an actuary to come in and determine what this liability is, and then we do some audit procedures to make sure that it's fairly stated. So when your actuary comes in, what they do is they do what's kind of called a depletion analysis. So the town has already put some funds aside to pay for those future health costs, and that's your OPEB trust fund. And when your actuary has, they'll start and say, I don't know, I can look, but for argument's sake, let's say that the investment rate, they're anticipating that on those funds there's going to be a 7% return. When those funds are depleted, they're required by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board accounting statements to use the municipal bond rate. And the municipal bond rate saw a very large increase from 21 to 22. I know that this is your 23 financial statements, but this liability is allowed to be presented 1 year in arrears. So this was the municipal bond rate as of June 30th of 2022. And there was a very large increase in the municipal bond rate from 21 to 22. So that's really the kind of reason. And it's pulled right off of an index fund. And that's what your actuary had pulled that figure from, was right off an index fund. And that's what they're required to use as the discount rate when your OPEB trust fund is depleted in their analysis.
Okay. So typically from Econ 101, the bond rate and the interest rates are usually inversely related. So we saw the Federal Reserve really on several occasions increase the interest rates to at least over 7%, I think. So why would the bond rate also increase? Can you help me understand that, or is it?
I don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah,
my apologies.
And so this is. Do we see wild swings like this with the OPEB? Maybe this is a question to you, Mr. Chair, to the Finance Director, because this is an unfunded liability that most towns and cities in Massachusetts struggle with every year. And so I was wondering, will we see something next year that's completely different in terms of increases? Or what?
Can I, before Ronnie takes a crack at this, I'll weigh in, and I won't call it an old man rant. It's like a middle-aged man rant. But The OPEB liability, to your point, Matt, is volatile and unpredictable. It's a function of, as was alluded to, it's in part tied to the bond rate. And we've talked at length in recent years about the fact that during a period of historically low central bond rates, borrowing costs were very, very low, but the liability that we were carrying on our financial sheets were incredibly high because the assumed rate of return is tied to that low rate. And we joked a couple years ago about when the rates start to increase, we will be sad because our borrowing costs will increase, but you'll see a drop in the on-paper liability that we have for the unfunded OPEB liability looking out. Part of the reason states, including Massachusetts, regulate the funding of pensions very tightly is because it's a predictable cost. There are real returns. The payments that retired employees earn are charted out on matrices. Whereas with OPEB, in order to know what the true cost of retiree health care is going to be in 2040, we need to make assumptions about what the cost of health care is going to be in 2040. So it's a murky soup of assumptions about what the medical and RX trends are going to be in the future, and assumptions about how we credit towns and cities for those portions of their liability that are not yet funded. So we have millions of dollars that we have invested in our trust. We get credit for those based on our investment policies, but there will be swings, not wild from year to year. I think what we're seeing this year is unusual, and I think that is a testament to a lot has been unusual the last few years. And just as a for example, I mentioned a few minutes ago, our investment income earnings this year were $1.7 million. They were $96,000 last year. A couple years ago, they were $400,000. A couple years before that, they were $75,000. So we generally budget around 160 for investment income. Some years we hit that, some years we don't. But if all of us in the room could predict out 10 years from now, we wouldn't be sitting here.
All right. Thank you for that explanation. Appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thank you, Matt. Maureen?
It's a lot of material. Wow.
Yes, it
You do
is.
a good job, and I have to compliment, the management team for putting this together. I've only gone through probably about half of this. So the actuary, is it the same actuary that we've used in the past?
It's a new actuary.
It is.
Um,
Can you disclose who it is?
It's Odyssey Advisors is your new actuary. In the previous years, it was KMS.
Okay, and like Steve said, on the cost of, investment income is great because of the interest rates, and it's hard, but the cost of borrowing is extremely high too. So,
That it is.
that is a big number that Matt did say. Let's see, I just had a couple of questions. The future health insurance, like Steve said, we can't predict that. We don't know where that's gonna go. The municipal bond rate, that helps us, right?
The increase in it certainly decreases your liability.
Right.
I don't know if I know what you mean by it helps you.
Well, it just helps the town's financial picture,
Sure.
right? Okay. And about the landfill, the borrowed money, how much do we still owe on that with that landfill, Rodney? I'm sorry. Through the chair, through Rodney.
Round we go.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So currently, we have $4.5 million in short-term notes outstanding, as well as a possible final phase to that project, which, again, it'll be revenue positive, but it will require us to spend some more money. But year to date, or project to date, we've brought in $5.7 million in cash. 3.5 closed out as part of these financial statements, and a little over $2 million has already come in FY24 as well. So this coming spring, we'll be recommending to town meeting to appropriate funds to pay off the outstanding notes, the final phase of the project, and then at that point, any additional revenue which we expect
That was it, yeah.
onto that will all just again become free cash that, as the manager mentioned, our plan is to invest in the debt stabilization towards any number of projects, including a public works facility.
Thank you. That was my question. What's
Yeah.
the outstanding debt on
Yeah,
that? Wonderful.
absolutely.
Let's see. I think that's about it for right now. Forward to diving deeper into this too. Thank you.
Thank
If you have any future questions, please feel free to relay them over. I'd be more than happy to answer.
And how do people see this? This is a book that we have. How does it become available to people?
It's on the website.
It is on the website,
Yep,
this
and
whole
we-
presentation, okay.
Correct.
Okay, all these numbers, wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Dan, would you like to go?
Thank you. Zach, can we turn to page 52 and 53, please? Every year I see these same statements on deposits that the town does not have a formal deposit policy. And as of June 30, 23, 40.5 million of the town's bank balance was exposed to custodial credit risk as uninsured. And also, we don't have a formal investment policy related to custodial credit risk. And as June 30, 23, 16.5 million was subject to risk compared to last year's 14.3. And down in the middle, it also says we do not have formal investment policies related to credit risk. And at the bottom of the page 53, the town does not have formal investment policies related to concentration of credit risk exposure. Should we have formal policy on these?
Certainly not a bad idea. Something that I'll verbally recommend here now. Something for the town to certainly look into. On that uninsured and uncollateralized number, that's not uncommon for communities in the Commonwealth to have funds that are not collateralized and uninsured. Town would certainly have to pay a premium for them to be fully collateralized. The bank's not going to do that for free. So that's something that the town needs to weigh, is the risk associated with that. Some communities will like to do something called VeriBank, where their policy is that they'll only work with banks that are, VeriBank kind of has like a stoplight system, green, yellow, red. Green is good. Jill is saying that she does use VeriBank, and only, town's only utilizing banks with the green, which means that they're a good bank. Yellow's a bit risky, and then red is a bit more risky. So if the town's doing that, it certainly helps alleviate some of that concern.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I may jump in for a second, I'd like to suggest that this board direct staff. It's been, I think, 4 years since we updated the financial policies. As Zach said, some of the guidance from the GFOA has changed since then. And this is something that we could take a look at as part of a broader review. And even if the policy is just to say that we mirror VeriBank, I think the point's well taken that it ought to be stated somewhere. So we can, after the budget process is wrapped up, we can take that on as something to take a look at and bring back to this board this year.
I
for
did ask
discussion.
that question offline last year on these same pages, and we didn't do anything about it. But I'm glad to hear that we'll look at it. Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dan. Gardner?
Sure. So, again, very thorough. The first 120 pages, deep detail, and I appreciate it. But Selectman Madonna asked where you get this online. I would recommend people get this online, if nothing else, from my favorite part of the book, which is the statistical section at the end. It's a really good snapshot of so many of the important numbers that happen in Danvers. You've got financial trends, you've got the revenue capacity, you've got debt capacity, demographics is important. You see what our population has been, what our valuation has been, how it's trended over 10 years. People are fond of, we talk about the tax levy and how much it goes up each year, and you can see exactly the numbers and the trends that are here, the population that's gone up. I look at the population between 2014 and 2023, we've gone up just over 1,000 people. That's 100 people a year on average. People talk about how we're exploding and being overrun with people coming. These are the real numbers. The real numbers are 1,000 people in 10 years, which is below, I can tell you already, is below the state average and the national average. We look at the types of businesses. We look at who our biggest employers are listed here, who our biggest taxpayers are listed here. The top 10 are listed here. This is a wealth of information in consumable bite-sized pieces that non-financial professionals can look at this and get a good snapshot about our town. I honestly think after this many years, the last 20 pages of this report, to me, provide the most information for the general public. And I recommend people get it and pull it out. Then if you want to dive deep into the numbers, you've got 120 pages ahead of it. So I appreciate it and thank you.
You're very welcome.
Any further comments or questions from board members? Steve, anything to follow up?
No, as Zach said, and as Maureen said, it's a lot of information. Any questions that folks have after this meeting, feel free to send those to me, and if we can't answer them, we can give Zach a call and get an answer.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Zach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you would be okay, I'd like to make a quick statement, if that would be okay.
Like a closing argument?
Yeah, if you will. I just want to say thank you to everybody involved in this process. I think multiple of you have mentioned tonight that it's a 150-page document. This thing just does not come together very easily. We spent quite a bit of time here at the town working very closely with Heather, Jill, and Rodney in particular, and their teams at large. And I just want to say thank you for the town to be well prepared and ready for us when we come in, because this is submitted for a national review, and it has to be submitted by December 31st. So having this document completed before December 31st is no easy task, and the town certainly does a great job of being well prepared to make sure that that is submitted for review by December 31st. So thank you to everybody in the town.
Thank you, Zach, for those comments.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, just a reminder, this is not just about town government, it also includes our enterprise funds and our school department. So if you need to know deep details about any of those five, this is where you go.
Thank you, Gardner. Next item.
The board will hear a presentation on a proposal to ban styrofoam in the town of Danvers.
Welcome, Linda. Welcome, Bob. And would you speak right into the microphone, Bob?
Yes. Good evening. I'm Bob Gamer, town meeting member. I will attend that February 26th meeting. I'm a member of Danvers Resilient and Green Sanctuary, the North Shore UU Church Environmental Action Group. This is Linda Leonard. She's a founding member of Earth Stewards and Interfaith Environmental Action Group and a member of Danvers Resilient. Thank you, members of the Select Board, for giving us this opportunity to address you on the issue of banning styrofoam, an issue we consider to be of so critical importance to the health and well-being of townspeople. It's universally accepted that styrofoam, also known as polystyrene, can have negative effects on both human health and the environment. When heated, styrofoam can release potentially harmful chemicals, including styrene, which is a lethal carcinogen. In addition, styrofoam is not biodegradable. It can take hundreds of years to break down in the environment, contributing to litter and pollution. When ingested by marine animals, it can cause suffocation and other problems. It is because of these negative impacts that there is a growing list of towns and cities across Massachusetts that have some kind of ban on styrofoam, including the adjacent communities of Salem and Marblehead. If you like, I can read you this list and/or submit this list to you. We also have the Salem warrant banning styrofoam for your perusal. I believe it's in front of you on.
We have that, thank you.
Yes. There are 50 cities and towns on this list, and not including Salem. One objection voiced against banning styrofoam is that eateries will be discouraged by the higher cost of buying products to replace styrofoam. Customers will be discouraged by paying higher prices as a result. Based on a poll conducted by Linda and I, who went to these eateries door to door throughout this town this past summer during July and August, we found quite the opposite result. I believe you have the doc with our findings.
We have it, thank you.
You will see that the overwhelming number of these eateries either don't currently use styrofoam or would be very willing to change. I've got one example to relate. I went to one very popular restaurant in Danvers, and the owner complained that if he used a biodegradable box like this one, customers would complain that it leaks. So we gave him one and said, try it. Came back in a couple of days, and he said, not only is he going to switch to the biodegradable box, but he's going to choose a more expensive model. And that's just one example. In regard to customer reaction, there could be no doubt whatsoever that there is widespread support these days for paying a few extra pennies to have a safe environment. I went to McKinnon's this morning to buy groceries, and this is what they packed them in. And it says at the bottom, just today, in the past they used paper bags. Reduce, reuse, recycle. Times are changing, attitudes are changing. To sum up, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has been at the forefront of environmental activism in recent years, with many towns and cities enacting legislation to ban single-use plastics. The town of Danvers proudly joined this group in banning single-use plastic. Linda and I led the initiative on this. Now, the need to ban the use of styrofoam before lasting harm is done has come. In talking to the town liaison to Danvers Resilient, he said that banning styrofoam was very much in the direction this group is moving. The harmful effects of styrofoam on the environment and endangering the health and well-being of citizens, young and old, cannot be denied scientifically. It is our considered judgment that these health risks, these risks to the environment, must preempt everything else, all other concerned, before it is too late. Our proposal that the use of styrofoam be banned from Danvers eateries. If you members of the Select Board agree that the use of styrofoam must be banned in town, we are here to ask, where do we go from this point? What concrete actions must be taken? In conclusion, we ask that we call on you, members of the Select Board, to please do your civic duty. We ask you respectfully to adopt this proposal. Thank you for your attention, and we would welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you, Bob, for the presentation. You asked directly what would be the go forward in order to, pursue your request for a ban. Steve, did you had some thoughts on that we discussed earlier today?
Similar to the request, as Bob mentioned, years ago, there was a request to consider a ban on plastic single-use bags. I believe that recommendation was taken up by the Select Board, and ultimately a warrant article was prepared because this would need to be a general bylaw that would be voted on by the town meeting. So the two options, if the board supported the proposal, they could direct staff to prepare a draft warrant article to be considered at the May town meeting. If the board declined to make that recommendation, the residents would certainly have the option of pursuing that through a citizen's petition, and that could be considered at town meeting. But ultimately, town meeting would have to decide this question.
Thank you, Steve. So I think answering Bob's question, goal number one would be to get the Select Board to support a warrant article drafted so as to balance all the interests. Failing that, it would be a citizen's petition, which is an alternative way to get a warrant article on the town meeting. So, does that make sense?
Yes, and let me just add one point. Styrofoam that is delivered to stores, we're not questioning that. It's stores packaging, Danvers stores packaging their products in styrofoam that we would like banned.
Good point, and I think maybe some of this would flesh out with questions from the board members. Dan, did you want to start?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I'm fully supportive of banning the styrofoam. I did mention in a previous meeting that I signed a letter from the environmental group urging the governor to ban styrofoam. I was very supportive of the ban on plastic bags. On a note, I pulled up that bylaw a month ago. I was looking to maybe write a start of a bylaw banning the styrofoam, but I got stymied because we have 3 descriptions of restaurants in our zoning. So I wasn't able to tackle that piece of it. I'm sure a smarter person than I can take care of that piece of it, and I see in the Salem they addressed that issue. And to Bob's point about to go, I think a good starting point is a bylaw that bans styrofoam from restaurants and salad bars and to-go packages. A little more difficult to ban the styrofoam being delivered by a big meat packing company. That's something that we'll have to work on in the future, but very least we can ban styrofoam to go. Certainly the Chinese restaurants figured that out years ago with their boxes. I think we have some good starting points from their survey on the effect to our restaurants. It's minimal. Minimal. And a lot of them are willing to make the change. So I don't think we'll be stepping on anybody's toes, so to speak. I think it's prudent for this board to support a warrant article banning styrofoam to go from our restaurants and salad bars. And I just want to make a note back on the plastic bags. The state of Rhode Island this year adopted a ban on plastic bags throughout the state. Their fines start at $100. Our first offense is a warning. Our second offense is $50. Rhode Island's $200. The third and subsequent offenses are $500 fines. Rhode Island takes it seriously. I think we should do the same. So I would support a warrant article banning styrofoam to-go packages throughout Danvers.
Thank you, Dan. Matt, do you want to start next?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to preface my comments by saying that I think this really should be something that is dealt with on Beacon Hill and from a statewide perspective, rather than having 351 cities and towns deal with it individually. It doesn't really seem like it's an efficient way to deal with the problem, much like these single-use plastic bottles, which also should be probably banned. So from a statewide perspective, there's probably, I did some research, there's about a dozen states throughout the country that have instituted statewide bans within the past few years. It's a relatively new effort. But for example, in Oregon, they have some exceptions, right? So we've talked about takeout and restaurant to-go food. Oregon has actually some exclusions. For example, eggs, meat, fish, and produce in supermarkets, which it seems like that's kind of almost like a loophole. I go to a local supermarket where I see in the produce department tomatoes, loose tomatoes. Sitting directly next to them are the same tomatoes on a styrofoam tray wrapped in plastic. It doesn't seem to make sense to me that you would choose the styrofoam and plastic. It seems like an obvious waste to purchase a product like that where you can just buy them loose. So that would be my only concern was that there would be need for some type of an exception in certain cases. Maybe you want to expand on that?
I would.
Linda, would you speak into the microphone,
sure.
please?
Thanks. We've talked about this before because we enacted our bag ban, our plastic bag ban in 2018. It went into effect in 2019. The Commonwealth still has not got a statewide bag ban. So I think that it's necessary for towns like Danvers, which are coastal towns, that really do impact the waterways with our waste that just drop by the wayside or whatever, to enact a ban, and that the more state groups that ban it, the more towns that ban it, the more pressure there will be on the Commonwealth to come up with a Commonwealth-wide ban. I don't think that there's much pressure on them right now. I think the grocery manufacturers and the plastic manufacturers have a very strong lobby. If you recall, the last time when we did, we went to town meeting and asked for town meeting to vote for the bag ban, the Plastic Manufacturers Association robocalled the entire town the day before.
Right.
They have a lot of money and they're very powerful. But that does not mean that we should sit on our duff and just wait for the Commonwealth to do it, because it's just not going to happen right away.
No, sure, and I support your effort, and it's true that it's kind of needs to be a grassroots effort at this point, because otherwise the status quo will remain the same. Just one last point is, when I have styrofoam at home, there's no way to really deal with it. I purchased a TV recently that there's a huge amount of styrofoam that was in the box. There's no way to really recycle it. You have to really just throw it in the trash. And then to Bob's point, where if some is on the ground, it deteriorates in the sun and it breaks into very small particles where it gets into the water, and also just land animals also consume it. So it's just a nefarious product that
it just doesn't ever go away.
Yeah.
Amazon, for example, you know.
Yeah, you get peanuts box, you get a huge box full of peanuts with one little item inside. So it's those are the types of examples I think that we should try to expand more than just the restaurants, not target them specifically, just include them in the ban, but also kind of try to expand it to other uses that we encounter every day. So I commend you on the effort, and I'm sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your efforts. That's all I have.
Thank you, Matt. Maureen?
Hi, Bob and Linda, great job with all this material. I am in favor too. I liked how the Board of Health, the Director of Board of Health, made recommendations about an outreach process to the local businesses. Did you talk with all these businesses?
Yes, we walked in.
You walked in, right?
Asked to speak to the manager or the owner.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
We spoke to managers and owners only. The question marks are where we didn't have a manager or an owner to speak with.
And they seem to go along with it, right? Their own.
Oh, yeah.
Even the owner of Brothers.
Yeah.
Bob, would you speak to the microphone, please?
Even the owner of Brothers, we sat down with him, and he said, although he uses styrofoam, he would be very happy, and I'm quoting him, to change if Danvers went that way.
I think it's, it is a health hazard. We want to take care of our environment. I will support this too for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Guard?
Thank you. So, a lot of times we get tagged with being too early to jump, being on the bleeding edge. I've been on the board long enough that I remember when we banned smoking in restaurants, and the outcry at that time was going to be, we're going to drive all the business out of Danvers to the other localities that don't have the ban. Within a couple of years, it was a statewide ban. Similar to the single-use plastic bags. We're going to cause a great harm to the businesses in town. There is a cost. There was a cost when they switched from plastic bags to paper bags. And convenience changed for some people. But I can tell you now, I wouldn't have before. I do now carry probably 15 reusable bags and pull them out of my truck when I go into Stop and Shop and pull them out of my truck when I go into Home Depot. I find them actually more convenient than paper bags and more resilient. So I don't mind being on the leading edge. The devil is in the detail. Now, if it were easy, and it were cost effective, these businesses would already be doing it. So it is going to come with some trepidation, some pushback. But the devil's in the details, and I'm happy to suggest that we should ask the town manager to do some warrant language around the use of styrofoam. But I would suggest that it is limited to restaurants And you'll get into the nuance of what if you have a Stop and Shop that also prepares food and you can put it out there. I don't think we should be doing it for retail service. Perfect example, egg cartons. Egg cartons come in styrofoam cartons, some of them. You can choose to buy them or not. You're not going to ask them to repack it. If Mr. Duggan noted that you have some tomatoes that come in styrofoam trays covered, those aren't done by the store. Those are done by their distributors.
And those, if you read the wording in the Salem bylaw and the Marblehead bylaw, those are exempted because they didn't start out being packaged in the town.
Okay, so those are the details.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that you've given us 2 examples, but those are the kind of the details I'll be looking for. If we go forward and have it, I would not support that. You know, I'm not going to support something that a retail business that packs and ships things at this point. I don't mind the restaurants, I don't mind the takeout, and if that's the extent of it, I can certainly be 100% behind this. If it goes past that, I'll have to have more thought on the language of the warrant. So I kind of would like to think that the board will give not only the request for the town manager to do it, but kind of a framework, so that we don't have to go back to 3 or 4 iterations of what's going on. And I'll say my framework is I don't mind restaurants doing takeout. If that's how we start and then maybe progress, that's fine by me.
We agree with that. Our approach is one step at a time.
Baby steps.
Yep.
Well, I think the concept is very sound. I'm cautious that the drafting of a proposed bylaw has to be done very carefully, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you know, if product even coming from outside the United States or crossing state lines, interstate commerce is involved in the ordinarily we are not allowed to prohibit interstate commerce. That's a federal matter. And I think that it's going to be a real, I think there will be several iterations. And I know that Bob and Linda will work with us, but the suggestion, Gardner, that you made that the manager be requested to provide a draft of a proposed bylaw, that's a lot of work, and I think it has to be done. I'm glad that we have the Marblehead and Salem examples, and I suspect there may be other examples in the Commonwealth.
I picked Marblehead and Salem because they are close to us.
Adjacent
Sure.
communities.
Well, that's going to be a real chore. Steve, is that something that we can fairly place on you?
Yeah, we can take that on. Yes.
Well then, Gardner, were you prepared to?
I would defer to Dan. He's been working hardest on this and the environmental issues. If he'd like to make that proposal.
Thank you. I would. I think that we should ask the town manager and staff to initiate an approach to focus on to-go containers from restaurants and salad bars on the elimination of styrofoam and banning it.
Is that a motion, Dan?
It is a motion.
Second motion.
Motion second. Is there discussion, Matt, as far as that motion?
No comment. All set.
Maureen?
I'm all set.
Yep. It's your motion and your second, and I'm in favor of it. So is this a public, this is not,
No.
this is an informational meeting, we don't need a, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
for doing
Mr. Chairman, if I may reserve the right to speak to the Board of Health letter under new business at the end of the meeting?
Sure, of course.
Thank you.
The board will hear fiscal year '24 second quarter report by the finance director.
Welcome, Rod.
Good evening. Through you, Mr. Chairman, in front of you this evening is the Quarter 2 update for FY24. Happy to entertain any questions. I'll highlight a couple things worth pointing out. On the revenue side, there are a couple things worth pointing out, all to the positive. Meals tax and hotel motel tax are running better than expected. As we're seeing, as we've talked about during the budget process for FY24, a full rebound since before the pandemic on those two local receipts. It is worth noting that that money is collected by the Commonwealth and distributed to the town in quarterly payments. They're not equal quarterly payments, so when we see, for example, hotel motel at 105%, it's not as simple as saying, well, then we should project to double that. In reality, more than 50%, in some cases closer to 70% of this revenue is collected in the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year, historically speaking. Moving down a little bit, the license and permits. As usual, this category is driven in large part by building permits, and that account is at $844,000 already through this first half of fiscal '24, driven really by large projects. I asked the building commissioner for some information, and of that $844,000, $450,000 alone is tied to the Maple Square project. So again, this is one that when we have big developments, we benefit from the building permit revenue, but it's not exactly something we can estimate in the future because it's so large project dependent that we generally budget to a conservative amount that we can historically predict. And then lastly, on the revenue, we touched on during the audit, but the investment income, better than expected. As you can see, we raised that to $500,000, which is the highest since I've been the finance director as far as an estimation, and we've close to tripled that. Again, it's positive revenue that'll close out to free cash. In terms of projecting it for the future, the Fed is already anticipating a rate cut. I don't think they will cut the rates as dramatically as they increased the rates over the past couple of years, but we should, over the course of the year, expect some type of rate cut. So again, it's just one where obviously we want to capture as much revenue as possible, but we want to be careful on the estimation front as that change can happen very quickly. I think that's it for the revenue. If there are any questions, otherwise I can jump into the expense side.
Thank you,
Can I
Marty.
jump in?
Members, other questions on the revenue?
Yep.
Matt?
So for the last line on the revenue, state aid. So yesterday, Mass DOR reported a decrease in collections of 6.9% compared to January of last year. How is that going to, how do you think that will impact our final numbers, like especially in terms of the cherry sheets and what we can expect from state aid?
Generally speaking, and I'll knock on wood when I say this, for our state aid, for example, Chapter 70 and unrestricted aid, that's really the last item both the governor or the legislature would touch when revenues are coming under. Normally you'll see like 9 seat cuts. That'll be both at the state level administrative costs they may cut, as well as certain earmarks or programs that they may have to reduce. But the contribution that we count as state aid here in Danvers is usually one of the last pots to be touched.
If I could offer just a little context to the adjustment of the mid-year revenue projection is separate from the budget process that's underway. I think the consensus revenue number earlier this year was 2%. Looking ahead, the governor's budget included a 3% increase for unrestricted aid, I believe. And as Rodney said, generally, again, looking back, historically, the governor's proposal is generally the baseline that the legislature then uses as they start their process.
Okay.
And one of the notes, and I was trying to think the last thing I was going to say, at a recent meeting, somebody, and it may have been the Secretary of ANF, was acknowledging that the reductions, the mid-year decreases we're seeing in revenue right now from the state are coming off of all-time highs in terms of revenue collection. So they're appearing as decreases year over year, but putting in context in terms of the last 5 years, they're still historically high revenue collections right now, but they're starting to level off and decrease a little bit.
Okay. And just to follow up to that, so I'm just concerned that if we are relying on state aid that was perhaps similar to last year, setting an FY for next year, we may be kind of underestimating what we're going to receive, so that may be a concern.
We generally budget based on the governor's proposal. So we're carrying in the draft budget right now, I believe it's a 3% UGA increase. And then the Chapter 70 is also a portion of that formula. But those are generally based on what comes out of the governor's budget.
Right. In Chapter 70, that's school?
School.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Maureen?
That was a good question, Matt. I was thinking about the same thing. I mean, what the state's given before, we don't know. It's probably gonna be a lot less. Just had a couple of questions. On the, revenue, where is the revenue from the dump? Where is that? Like, you know, we make money from the dump?
At the transfer station?
Yeah, the transfer station.
So
Sorry,
we
I said
have
dump.
a, yeah, no, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Yeah, so we have an agreement in place where, for FY '24, they'll be paying us $100,000 in host fees for the transfer station. I believe that is under the fee category.
Okay. And that was my question, are we gonna get more money from the state? We don't know. Oh,
Yeah, so again, the governor's budget, the net overall is only, again, as
Three?
the manager mentioned, it's less than that. We went up 3% in unrestricted aid, a lot less than that in Chapter 70, and there's a couple other smaller accounts like charter reimbursement. The net effect as of the governor's budget year over year is 0.77% increase over from FY '25 projected over FY '24. As the manager mentioned, though, you know, we'll see how it happens with the legislature. Usually it goes up, not down, knock on wood, but we'll see how it goes through the process. But governor's budget conservatively is what we would estimate as part of the '25 budget process.
And how are we, Rodney, how are we making out with the state aid with the families in town? You know, where are we at, you know, with that, please?
I know we've received one payment. I'm not familiar with the status. It goes directly to the schools as part of the process in terms of the per student cost, but.
Yeah, in the summer, the state, and I think these numbers are right. It was $104 or $105 per student per day in a school district based on student population as of maybe December 1st. The state also provided, I believe it was several $1,000s per pupil for costs, you know, backpacks, coats, clothes, other, you know, not just those things, but other things. It might have been $1,000 per pupil. I'm trying to remember from 6 months ago what this information was. And as Rodney said, I believe the schools just received their first reimbursement. So we know the students that are in the classrooms at each grade level, the services that they're using, the aids that they're using, and all of those costs are reimbursable by the state.
All of them? All of them? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Within the per pupil per day. And
So it's not costing the town?
No.
Any extra, okay,
Nope.
perfect, okay. And, sorry, Rodney, but how much do we have budgeted for snow and ice right now?
Roughly, so and I was going to touch on that on the expense side, but roughly we have a little over 700,000 budgeted. As of December 31, we had spent less than 10% of that. For a fresher update, my latest storm report we've received from Rob Dever, Director of Operations, is we still have roughly 50%, 56% remaining in those accounts through the most recent
Good,
storms.
Good, okay. And that pertains to like the salt and everything, and the patching the holes and the road work, the cap? right?
Yeah, so for our snow and ice, it includes winter chemicals, staff overtime, contracted services, and then a very small amount for salt, but yeah.
Okay. I think that's about it for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Dan, you want to go next?
No, Rodney hadn't gotten to expenditures yet. I don't know if he wants to continue, but he answered the big elephant in the room on the snow and ice. Thank you.
Got it all right to proceed to?
Yeah, I'll
next one?
hold my questions to the end.
Rodney, please.
Sure. Thank you. On the expenditure side, again, happy to answer any questions. A couple things worth pointing out on the general government. The Finance Committee reserve is unspent. Again, that's budgeted $125,000. We have some potential surplus based on police vacancies for public safety. Education is tracking similar to previous years. Essex Tech, again, are scheduled payments. We touched on snow and ice. Again, a lot of these are just based on the scheduled contributions. So while you see retirement, it's 100% spent. That's because the first week in July, we make our full retirement contribution. Other than that, again, I'm happy to answer any specific questions.
Thank you. Matt, had you questions on?
Sure. You just mentioned police vacancies, so that says to me that we're calling in people on overtime, so the cost would be higher than if we actually went out and hired new staff. Is that accurate to say, you think?
I would say historically, the overtime is cheaper just because the overtime would be targeted on the shifts you need coverage versus
So we're
if you
not-
hire full-time staff, they're in the rotation, they have their own vacation and sick time.
Benefits,
etc.
yeah, et
exactly.
cetera.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think that's not something we want to do in the long term. Okay.
Correct.
All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Maureen, had you questions on expenditures?
It was really like the snow and the ice, and the revenue from the, I think I'm pretty much, I mean, the retirement, we can't, like you said, that's because you paid that in July, right?
Yep.
Okay. And the employee benefits, can you touch base on that a little bit?
Yeah, so again, that's the timing of certain charges. So for example, we do a reconciliation twice a year on retiree health insurance. So that'll happen in January, February for the first 6 months, and then we do it again to close the fiscal year. So that's why that's understated. We also have a variety of transfers that don't go into effect until January, so we wait till December when we do the recap and finalize the tax rate. And then in January, we do some of those transfers related to OPEB, workers' comp, unemployment, et cetera. So again, while it looks like 32% expended, in reality, it's on track for the 100% expended.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Maureen. Dan, did you?
All set.
All set. Guard, anything on expenditures?
Well, I'm going to question the whole, I just want to say, I appreciate the notes here. Obviously, you gravitate to the outliers, so you gravitate to the things like 16% motor vehicle tax, knowing, but your note identifies the fact they just went out. So I'm wondering if there isn't a way that we might add a column that says forecast. There are things you're not going to be able to forecast. You know, there are things like debt. It's done. It's 100% it's done. There's no more to be done about on here, even though it's only 6 months of the record. But if it were to forecast or trend out, I think it would be helpful. But the devil's in the details, the devil's in the notes. And overall, we're at 49%. So I think this is fine, and appreciate the notation where we think it might be out of whack. But what are Medicaid reimbursements? Why are we getting revenue called Medicaid reimbursements?
Yeah, so this is revenue related to services that schools provide to students that receive Medicaid.
Okay, thank you.
So we reimburse
Okay.
some of those costs. Yeah.
Thank you. That makes sense. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm all set.
Thank you, Guy. Steve, do you recommend any action by the board with
Nope,
respect
we,
to?
we generally do this the second and third quarters. First quarter is generally too early, and the fourth quarter, we're into the audit. So the recommendations from our financial advisors and the rating agencies is to do check-ins during the budget year with the board. As Ronnie mentioned, if the fateful first year when snow was $1 million over budget, that was the kind of outlier. Had we been doing this at the time, we would have been talking about. But generally, it's to let the board know if things are on track, and to call your attention to anything that isn't, so that we can make recommendations for course adjustments.
Thank you, Steve.
Mr. Chairman, can I just
Sure.
ask a question to the town manager? So, Steve, when we have a good year with no storms, and we budget for Rodney, when we budget with that money, what happens to that money afterwards? Does it
That-
stay in that, where does that money go?
It ends up in our free cash certification at the end of the year.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Maureen. My only comment is this one little single page, which is so neatly presented, represents hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of labor hours of our financial people. So I respect that, and I know it looks simple, but it isn't simple. So nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
The board will hear a fiscal year '24 second quarter report by the, is that what we just did?
Yep.
Sorry. Let me cross that off. The board is requested to vote to approve the sale of 3,753,242 general obligation bond anticipation note issuance to Piper Sandler and Company at par and accrued interest, if any, plus a premium of $13,586.74.
Who's to speak to this?
Well, If I may ask the question,
Sure.
this is a done deal, we just need a motion from the board to approve the sale, and Rodney will run to the bank and get the money?
That is
Not quite
correct.
that simple, but Ronnie, do you want to describe anything?
Again,
Or
this
offer any
is
detail?
3.7 of the 3.753 is related to the Northland Substation project, which we authorized at the most recent town meeting. So again, this is year one of that project. Again, if there are questions about the project
So
itself.
we're approving the borrowing for a project already approved.
Yes, correct.
And I would like to take a moment to acknowledge two of the guests in the room who haven't said much tonight. We've had some head shakes and nods. David does have lots of friends. I just want to put that on the record, too. But Jason Small is our Director of Engineering and Operations from Electric, and David Lane, of course, our Public Works Director and our Director of Utilities. And we invited them tonight in case there were any questions related to the project that this bond is being used for. But as Ronnie said, the sale is associated with that capital project.
All right, Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion?
Can I ask a question, Dan?
Yeah.
Is it all done? Is that all the, just? okay.
Project's just beginning, yeah.
So how much more?
I believe it was an estimated $14 million project. Yeah.
Okay. And this is for the substation? Okay. Where is that?
You want to maybe go to the
Through
microphone? and
the,
give
yeah.
And just while Jason's getting settled, this would have been approved as part of the capital plan in last year's budget. We issue bond anticipation notes to cover the cost of a project as the project is being completed. And then at the end of the project, we would issue permanent debt to pay off those bond anticipation notes and finance the project. So we would never, we only borrow as much as we will use realistically in the construction period that's ahead of us. And Jason, if you want to describe the project.
Yes, the Northland Substation is located over at the Liberty Tree Mall.
Jason, could you speak right into the mic, please?
I am. It's not, sorry, I'm getting a little cold.
Okay.
So my voice is cracking a little bit, but the Northland Substation is an existing substation currently that's behind the Liberty Tree Mall. It's currently one transformer and 2 circuits. We already have gained the easement from the mall adjacent to that lot to build a brand-new substation with 2 transformers and 6 circuits to provide better capacity and reliability to the town. That existing substation is aging, so this would be a brand-new one. It would also help us offload some load from other aging substations in the general area and get those retired before they reach end of useful life.
And I think what he didn't say also is it will cure one of the worst sightline issues that we have in town. If anyone who tries to turn left out of the mall to get back to Town Hall knows that the existing substation makes it almost impossible to see, and you have to pull halfway out into the intersection to do that. So in addition to needing to upgrade that substation based on the capital plan for town capacity, working with the mall, we were able to choose a new location for it so that we can remove the existing and create a safer traffic flow there.
Yeah, I just have a question. So when you say you're retiring other ones, which ones are you planning on retiring?
Over the next 5 to probably 10 years, we're hoping to retire the one next to the middle school and the one on Andover Street, kind of in front of 150 Andover Street. We have current preliminary plans to replace those with something smaller in the area to provide additional capacity, but those are also aging. So in the meantime, this would allow us to remove the aging infrastructure and give us time to plan to add something in its place in the future.
And we're putting this into our budget moving forward?
It is in our current budget. We have a 6-year kind of capital budget, and this substation is in it, and the retirements are in it.
In the electric
budget.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
Outgoing 6 years. The potential replacements in those spots in Andover and by the middle school are not in there just yet because we're still kind of evaluating options. But there might be something back in its place, but much smaller.
And more efficiency, more efficient.
Yeah, the newer
better.
transformers are, there's
And
new
longevity, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, all right, that's it, thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Dan, any questions?
No.
Garden, any questions?
I'm all set.
We have a motion.
Yes, I move that the board vote to approve the sale of $3.753242 million general obligation bond anticipation note issuance to Piper and Sandler and Company at par and accrued interest, if any, plus a premium of $13,000 $586.74 as presented.
Thank you, Dan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion from members of the board? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is a vote. Thank you, Jason.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I just want to add that Jill Summit does a lot of the legwork on this project. She'll be the one running to the bank for the 3.7.
Thank you, Jill.
I don't mind her running to the bank. I want to make sure she comes back from the bank.
The board
Good night,
will-
gentlemen.
The board will consider adoption of the budget goals for fiscal year 2025 with an endorsement of the school committee and library trustees.
Mr. Chairman, as the town clerk just said, the goals before you were distributed, I believe, before the holidays. They were then sent to the library trustees and the school committee. As you'll note, the bottom half of the first page and the second page don't really change from year to year. Those are the broad goals and policies that the development of the budget operate within. Each year, we call out areas of particular concern or interest, and those three I'll just read. And again, it's the select board's budget goals, but generally we like to have the school committee and the library review them and offer any comments or thoughts there in support of these. The first is working with the schools to fund and implement a strategy to curb the growth of out-of-district special education spending. The second is to absorb new collective bargaining agreements once settled that fairly compensate town employees while maintaining service levels and budget solvency. And the third is to incorporate annual costs associated with new technology, e-permitting, cybersecurity, et cetera, in the general fund operating budget. So I would be happy to take any questions the board might have. We would be looking for the board to discuss and potentially vote on this tonight. And this ends up being incorporated into the budget document, and also will help the departments to continue their preparation of the budget.
So Steve, you are requesting that the board adopt these goals. What about the ongoing strategic objectives?
We, certainly if the board has comments or thoughts on those can be amended anytime that we want. They are pretty general in nature, but certainly they are the goals of this board, so we would be happy to take any comments or questions.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes, please, Dan.
Thank you. I'm fine with the front of the page. That's all well and good. Just some questions on the backside on revenue. I just need a little explanation because it seems to be, the statement seems to be at odd with, well, doesn't make sense to me. Let me put it that way. We're going to expand to broaden the revenue base. I think that makes sense. I don't know how we're going to do that. But mitigate against reductions in anticipated revenue sources. They seem to be in conflict with each other.
In those two phrases in particular?
Yes, in the same paragraph under revenue, the two objectives seem to be at odds with each other. Which one are we going to do? Broaden the base or mitigate against reductions?
I don't necessarily view those as mutually exclusive. An example, in recent years, the board, in terms of diversifying and broadening the revenue base, the board adopted and supported the voluntary pilot program with mixed success. But that was an attempt by the board to look at ways to bring revenue into the town budget that aren't necessarily reliant on property tax or state aid or permits and fees. Mitigating against reductions in anticipated revenue, I think from year to year that's a bit opaque, but I would point toward the work that the planning board has done really over 2 decades in looking at industrial, former industrial zones in town, the highway corridor zone, the downtown, looking at areas where redevelopment could yield properties that are more valuable, which in turn would generate new tax revenue. So you'd be mitigating against reduction in, and I think that the closure, the sale and closure of Hot Water is an example of that. That was a light manufacturing use that existed in the downtown. I'd be hard pressed to give you an example of that type of use coming to any town that I'm familiar with in the last 3 decades. So rezoning an area like that would, I think, fit into that particular category. But again, these are pretty general, I think, and I can understand.
They're objectives, they're not goals.
Correct.
I guess it allows us to be able to react and pivot to given situations as they come up. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Dan.
On that thought, just building on that, I didn't want to interrupt you. I saw that second line about as more, and maybe it should be reworded a little bit, minimize our reliance on certain revenue funds. We don't want to put all our eggs in the Cherry Street sheet basket or anticipated state aid. We do a good job of trying to spread our revenue sources and our reliance and dependency on those revenue sources so that if we take a hit in any one of them for some reason, COVID happens, meals taxes bottom out. So if we try to make sure we mitigate against those potentials, or Mr. Duggan brought up the fact that revenues are low. Now, how that translates, we can't really tell, but, you know, we shouldn't be, there are points that we should make sure we're not heavily reliant on certain income sources because other communities do and they take tremendous hits if those come in low. So I guess I see that as basically spreading the reliance to not endanger us. But other than that, the only other comment I had is, I don't know how the board feels about this and just would ask, kind of a straw poll, but there's nothing in here about trying to work with Essex Tech. I consider that one of our biggest uncontrolled expense that we have no ability for consistency on, no ability right now to curtail. And they're expanding. They're working to expand. And right now, their budget is equal to several of our town departments, our library, our senior center, and a couple of others. And I'll be noting again that at the budget time. If it goes up, it's soon to be the same as our fire department for the sake of the number of kids. So I don't know if we want to put something in here about, to me, that's an expense, or an expense goal, is to try to mitigate that uncontrolled expense. So I don't know if the other board members feel that way or not. I'll forego if I'm the only one standing out there on this.
Well, we obviously know that it's a problem, it's an ongoing problem, but who's to say in 5 years that kids aren't applying to the tech like they are today?
May I offer a couple thoughts? So one note is that applications are down this year. Our relative number is down. I think Beverly's looking at about a $750,000 increase in their assessment this year, which is one of the concerns we raised with a admissions policy that doesn't have any guidelines built into it, is that there are years when the town of Danvers is facing a $600,000 increase. There are other years when Beverly is facing a $700,000 increase. We did discuss specifically putting Essex Tech in here years ago, and generally agreed that it was addressed. There was a year we did bring something to town meeting, so that year certainly it would have risen to being one of the primary issues. But it does talk in the coordination, the first bullet on the second page, about identifying and collectively addressing cost drivers that affect the entire organization. But I think that, to Dan's point, it's certainly present and top of mind. But it was discussed in the past and not included and called out in the broader policy.
My own thoughts, the Aggie is a runaway creature, and I get discouraged because I don't know that there's anything that we can do to protect ourselves from the runaway, because it is a matter which is once again controlled by the state legislature, and we have no, seems to me, we have no control over it. I think that it should be noted consistently as a matter of great concern to the citizens of this town, because we are paying so much more than our fair share of the cost of running the Aggie. And the Aggie is in the process now of doing a major expansion up there. That funding comes from the legislature. And so I think it should be included within our constant concerns as far as our budget. But what to do about it, I just get so discouraged that I stop thinking about it.
Can I make one more comment real quick? And at risk of this turning into a discussion on Essex Tech, just a couple of notes. The school committee has submitted letters of interest to the MSBA. There is no major expansion underway, but the superintendent and the committee have been very clear in their desire to expand the campus. I will note, and again, the school committee has made clear that
Their school committee?
the school committee,
Or Essex Tech?
the Essex Tech School Committee has made clear that discussing changes to their admissions policies along the lines of what we've proposed is not something that they have an appetite for. But I do want to acknowledge, I mentioned, applications are down this year. I think, Adam Federico is the high school principal. He's working incredibly hard to keep kids there. There was a new principal hired last year at the middle school. That principal is working very hard to keep kids there. Our new superintendent, Dan Bauer, is committed to trying to keep kids there. So in answer, in part, to your question, David, you're correct. I don't think that Essex Tech itself is interested in having the conversation. I think they've made that pretty clear. And so it's up to our school committee and our school administration to try to offer the kids in Danvers a product that they want. And I think that's what they're focused on at this point.
It was reported this week in the paper that the superintendent of Heidi is fighting blind enrollment opportunities.
I think, in fairness, the
Blind lottery.
The Association of Vocational and Technical Schools is opposed to the blind lottery system. The superintendent is part of that group. There are legislators who are very focused on that. That's a state level conversation that is happening. That is consistent. When the town approached the school a couple years ago, our recommendation was twofold. It was give towns and cities some idea of what the appropriate balance of seats between towns and cities looks like, and consider a blind admissions policy, because not so much an issue in Danvers, although it is an issue in Danvers, but the cities were particularly concerned because the students that the school was accepting didn't look like the students that were left behind, which is where the lottery conversation came from. But we read the same article, and I think she was responding to a letter that was sent by legislators to the Association of Vocational and Technical Schools.
So I'm fine with this document as it is, Mr. Chairman.
Steve, do you want to vote on this?
Well, I don't know if, I'm not sure you've heard from all the members.
Oh, sorry. Matt, did you have comments on this?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And please
So-
speak into the
Sure.
microphone.
So on page 1, under FY25 budget goals number 2, absorb new collective bargaining agreements. And it mentions fairly compensate town employees, which is should be an objective. But when we say absorb new collective bargaining agreements, do we have a handle on what that actually is? Is it a number that we can truly accept, or is it something that's kind of, I know that this is a negotiated discussion between town management and with the unions, and I think this year there seems to be at least a half a dozen unions that are up for renewal of their contracts. So what I'm not really familiar with this process and what the potential impact is. This something that we should be concerned about?
Yes and no. I think so. We have 7 town unions. The librarians are unionizing. Many libraries in the state are unionized. AFSCME reached out to the library, and so we will have 8 unions on the town side, although, again, technically it's 7 on the town side, 1 with the library. The teachers union is the largest bargaining unit that we have in town. There are other AFSCME units on the school side, the aides. And so all of the town contracts in Danvers are on the same cycle. I think that that's a good thing. There are towns and cities where all of the contracts are staggered, and so the town or the city is essentially in a state of perpetual collective bargaining. We know every 2.5 years that we're going to enter a 6-month period where we are working with all of our e-boards and union leadership to negotiate fair contracts for the subsequent 3 years. So that is that's the process that we've started. I participate in negotiations with the teachers union. That's an option. It's not required. I have a lot of colleagues who choose not to do that. The town manager in Danvers has always done that. I think that's a good thing, to be at the table and to hear what they're talking about and to be able to offer comment and thoughts in terms of the town's fiscal picture. But the word absorb is a little bit odd here, I'm realizing. The reality is, we're putting a draft budget together now. We have numbers that are coming in that are getting fed into that budget. We have our health renewal coming in. We have state aid numbers coming in. We know what our retirement number looks like. We have a lot of contracts that have to get projected out, and non-personnel contracts that get baked in. And then we will do our best to carry within that budget a number that we think is appropriate based on we had about an 18-month increase in inflation, which is now back to its historic trend. That's something that we have to be mindful of. We have to look at our comps. We have to do some market analysis. That's been underway for a number of months. By the end of February, we will have hopefully sat with all of our unions to start that process. Takes a couple of months. So should you be nervous? We've been negotiating these contracts for decades. I have no problem saying publicly that we're very lucky in Danvers. We have unions who are very engaged but also understand that they're part of a broader organization. We've been very successful in the past 9 years reaching agreements, and I have every confidence that we'll do the same this spring. I think it's here again because we're on a 3-year cycle. So this is where we are in that cycle.
Right, and just to follow up, I think, did you mention recently that this is going to be a transparent process for the board to actually?
So the school, if any board members would like to sit in on the teacher negotiations, the MTA made as one of their requests as part of the ground rule setting process that any member of the DTA be able to join that process. So similarly, the school committee asked that in consideration of that members of, other members of the school committee or the select board or the finance committee could sit in as silent observers to that process. So
I see.
If any board member is interested in participating in that process, simply send me an email and I can share upcoming dates.
Yeah, I'd like to understand more about the process. All right, so that's so all set with that. And then on the page 2, just one other item. The third bullet point down, personnel. Again, the OPEB issue, retiree health care costs, and we heard the finance director mention earlier tonight that we don't have a crystal ball. It's very difficult to kind of forecast what those costs are in the long term. But I believe within the past couple of years, we were beginning to fund our OPEB liability and try to make it almost fully funded by maybe 2040 or 2050. Is that a reasonable target?
You want to, yeah, I see Rodney's eager to jump in.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So the select board acted last year when the pension system's fully funded, which right now we're on a schedule that would fully fund in 2035. That aggressive funding to hit that target could be redirected to address the OPEB liability.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's, can we think that that's a work in progress?
Yeah, so we still invest, we do a contribution every year, and we increase that contribution by
Right.
$50,000. But again, right now, I believe we have, roughly $11 million against, as you saw earlier, $120 million liability. So versus the pension system where we're roughly 60% funded, so.
This Public Employee Retirement Administration Commission, they kind of track OPEB liabilities for all the cities and towns in Massachusetts, and they issue a report. I think the last one was maybe 2021, and Danvers is in the top 75 percentile. There are other towns that have literally no money at all in their OPEB funds. So I think we're maybe average. We have around 6 or 7%, which is kind of, I think, normal, or if you want to say that. So it'll never be fully funded. It'll just be pay as you go kind of thing.
Through you, Mr. I think eventually the goal would be to fully fund it, like we're
Yeah.
working with pension. But again, I think it's not just a multi-year, but probably a
Right.
couple decade process.
So kind of like every year, kind of allocate some free cash just to show the bond rating agencies that we're making a good effort to kind of deal with this unfunded liability, I think. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I would offer, Matt, just as context, so we have really two expenses each year related to retiree health care. There's the cost for the upcoming year. So we have active retirees on our plan, and we're paying for part of their health insurance. And then it's setting aside funding for that future unfunded liability. So it's almost two pieces. So we cover the actual cost each year for the retirees that we have. But every entity, government finance, S&P, the state is saying it would be, their view, reckless not to be setting aside funds because those costs are only going to increase. You're going to have more retirees with higher costs in the future than you have today. So everybody covers their ongoing costs. There's no town or city that's not paying, I shouldn't say none, but everybody pays for the actual ongoing, year in, year out cost. And then as you're saying, some towns have planned further ahead than others in terms of how to handle those future costs.
Right. Just one last question. Are these retirees, are they eligible for Medicare Part B and C? So we're paying part of their health care costs, but not all of it.
Correct. For those retirees on Medicare, it's a similar split. We pay 70% of the premium, and they pay
Okay.
30%.
So is that a benefit to the town to have Medicare absorb some of the costs? I would think so, right? And do we encourage that somehow, kind of?
We require it at a certain point. We will transition employees. They'll have, young, I'll say young retirees are generally on the active plan until they qualify, and then we work very closely with Maya to make sure that our retirees are able to access all of the Medicare benefits that are available to them.
Okay.
And we make changes to that almost on a yearly basis, working with our health consultants.
But at the end of the day, the retirees have the decent health care coverage, so that if something happens to them, they're not, left out in the cold, that they can draw either on Medicare or whatever funding that we have.
Correct.
Okay. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Can I ask about that, just to piggyback that? So help me understand, so someone works for the town, they retire. We give them health insurance till they're of age, is that what it is? Till they go on Medicare? No.
They're entitled. We contribute to their health insurance in perpetuity.
Okay, so, and then what happens? So Medicare kicks in, which helps save the town money.
So at some point, they'll transition from an active plan to a Medicare plan,
Medicare, but
which will be more cost effective
we
for both
pay-
the retiree as well as the town.
Does the town pay for, I might be supplemental insurance or anything like that? You know how people have, when they're on the Medicare, they have the supplemental insurance?
We do the sub plans as well, but
We do that too?
Yeah, so
We
you
fund that?
and it's more so the most expensive health insurance we have is for the active employees.
Right.
And typically, electric, fire, and police can retire younger than other group that we're going to get into PIRAC and Group 4 versus Group 2 retirement. But our younger retirees will stay on the active plan. As soon as employees are age eligible to take advantage of any of the Medicare plans, our HR department, our benefits coordinator will help work with them to transition them onto those plans. We still share part of the cost of the premiums for those, but we very actively manage the retirees to make sure that they're on the plans that are going to get them the benefits they need, but also be cost effective for the town.
That's, okay. thank you. I wanted-
If I could just offer one more point, because I came from the healthcare industry. Health plans themselves, when you're Medicaid eligible and you've taken them, their policy is that you have to go to the Medicare to get paid first, and they'll reimburse what remainder fits. So you're funneled through Medicare first to try to reduce the cost of the insurance company, let alone, that's why their premiums are lower for Medicare plans.
Okay. I'm up, David, is that okay? So, Steve, you talked about that word absorbed, right, on number 2. My question is, can you elaborate a little bit on fiscal year 2025 budget goals, number 3, please?
Yeah, we, two things. We fund each year the tech plan. So when I got here 9 years ago, we were paying for a lot of ongoing technology operating costs through our tech warrant, right? And simply put, we're using one-time funds, being free cash, to pay for costs that are really ongoing costs. This is why several years ago, we haven't gotten there yet, but we've been talking about trying to transition some of our fleet replacement costs out of free cash and into the tax levy. Coming out of the pandemic, we haven't been able to get traction to do that. All the steps we've taken to create budget capacity, like revamping our health plan, those dollars have been absorbed by other costs that are increasing faster than inflation. So we have some costs in our tech plan that still need to be migrated over into the operating budget. And when we took advantage of some of our ARPA money to implement organization-wide e-permitting, so we, prior to the standard platform, we had departments using different permitting modules. So, and again, in simple terms, you have a resident or a contractor who is using one software program to get a permit for X and a different program for Y, and Record's using something else. So we've tried to institute a standard platform and bring departments on who weren't using online permitting. We use money to upgrade the website. We're in the process of upgrading the financial software using those one-time dollars, but there will be licensing costs associated with those things. So now, as we're coming out of the stimulus period, we're trying to figure out which of those costs should stay in IT and which of those costs should be migrated over to the appropriate department.
Yeah, because we did vote, we did give IT a big budget. I remember, right, we voted on a big budget for the IT people, that department, so I was just wondering about that. And then on bullet point number 2, the quality services and education of the library, I like that. I like how tracking the demographic trends, the shifting services, the needs across the community. We always want to maintain, as we keep on saying, the service levels while reducing the cost. I think that's really good. And, I was with Matt, too, about the retiree health costs, which we got answered. And can you talk to us a little bit about capital improvement plan? Summarize, exactly what that means?
So each year in the budget, we have the back section of the budget includes two things. There's the capital budget, which is the non-operating expenses that we're going to make for the upcoming year, and then the capital plan is looking out generally 5 years and beyond for larger items that are coming. A new fire pumper, as David and Jason were saying, substation replacements for the electric department. So we have historically funded our capital plan using free cash. And again, we've tried the last few years unsuccessfully to get a toehold in the tax levy. So, and again, the example we've used, we know each year we're going to buy different pieces of equipment. Some years it's a backhoe, some years it's a school bus, some years it's 4 or 5 police cruisers. Those are all technically one-time expenses, but in any given year we know that we're going to spend $500,000 on fleet. So if that's an ongoing cost, we would love to see it, and we try to work with this board and town meeting to get those things into the tax levy. But again, When we did the health plan 5 years ago to try to create about $1 million in cost avoidance and budget savings, that money got soaked up by Essex Tech and healthcare and all kinds of other stuff. So the capital plan is the non-operating expenses. These aren't people, these aren't supplies, these are big pieces of equipment, large dollar expenses.
And, we want to watch that too. Naturally, if we don't have the money, we can't spend it. But that's really all I like Gardner's idea about adding in working with the Essex Tech. They are a neighbor, so that's it. Thank you, David.
Maureen. Dan, did you?
No, I'm ready to make a motion to accept the town fiscal year 2025 budget goals and objections as discussed.
Thank you. Is there a
Second.
second? Okay, a motion and a second. Is there further discussion among members of the board? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is a vote. Thank you. And thank you, Steve, for the hard work on that.
Thank you all.
The town manager will report to the board on various items of interest.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I have 2 items tonight. Both were provided, I think, in the back of your packet. The first is an email from Cindy Dunn, the Executive Director of the Danvers Housing Authority, indicating that one of the select board appointed members of that board had to step down for health reasons. And Cindy is looking for a recommendation from this board for someone to fill the remainder of that term through June of 2026. And her request was that we use the same process that we did last time, which was very effective. That would be for Cindy to send letters to all of the tenants, because the seat has to be filled by a tenant, encouraging any interested tenants to submit a talent pool form that they would fill out and send to Ann Freitas in my office. We will collect those forms and then share those with the board and invite tenants to come before the board and express their interest. So my recommendation would be that I believe Cindy has sent or will soon be sending the letters out, and probably April would be a good time to invite tenants in to address the board. And I would say April-ish, so it could be March, could be May, depending
You
on
don't need any
response.
action from the board, do you, Steve?
I do not. If the board is comfortable with this approach, and I'm seeing some nodding heads, and we'll proceed. And then the other one, we don't need a vote tonight, but just to take a look at, these are the list of board-appointed committee members that are coming up for reappointment this spring. So if anyone has thoughts, they can share those now. If you want to follow up with me after the meeting, that's fine. But the intent would be to bring these back on an upcoming board agenda for board consideration. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Could I ask the board to vote on the consent calendar as they appear
So
on the
moved.
agenda?
Second? Yeah, I'm sorry, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
I thought you seconded it.
Well, I know, but I don't like the second things. I think I should not. If,
That's correct.
give everybody a chance. Discussion, none. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It is a vote. Thank you.
Correspondence, select board new business, previous new public business, updates, and select board closing comments.
Matt, do you want to start?
Sure. Just 2 items. So the first was the police response to the incident at 98 Newbury. I was listening, the town manager had called me and let me know that it was unfolding, as it was unfolding, and so I turned on my scanner and kind of listened to kind of the response from our police department, and it was very professional. I think that they took their time and handled it very professionally, and evacuated residents that were in close proximity to the suspect, and I think it just illustrates the professionalism that we have in our police department.
Those are the things we signed tonight.
The other item has to do with Massachusetts being the only state in the country that is a right to shelter, and it's having an impact on not only the revenue or the cost of dealing with I'll call them migrants because that's what's being used in news media. I think the governor has appropriated $250 million recently to house these migrants. And I'll just give you a couple of examples about where I've heard that this is occurring. At Salem State, the South Campus on Harrison Road, dozens of, we'll call them families, terminals at Logan Airport, South Station, and now the Molina Cass Recreation Center in Roxbury. And I also see that there are at least 100 migrants in Danvers in our hotels on Route 1, and we had the situation with homeless people being housed there several years ago, and I thought that we had addressed that appropriately with the state. It seems inappropriate to me that we have citizens that have lived here all their lives, seniors, veterans, single-parent families that struggle with housing, with food, with health care, and yet people that have entered the country illegally have suddenly jumped to the front of the line and are being given, EBT cards, training, and resources that, are quite expensive. So I just think that it's really inappropriate, and I think the right to shelter should be for residents of Massachusetts, not to encourage people to come here and take advantage of our largeness. I just have a question for the town manager through you, Mr. Chairman. What is the impact of having these migrants living in our community? Is there a cost associated with that? Do they attend our schools? Can you kind of just, if you have any information related to that?
So the EA program, which is what you're describing, the state enters into agreements with private facilities. So there are several motels in Danvers that partnered with the state, as was the case back in 2014 and 15, the last time this program was running hot. And so the state enters into agreements with those facilities. In this case, there's also a social services provider out of Lynn that the state has contracted with that has set up office space in those facilities and is working to support the families that are there. In my conversations with the department heads, really the only department that is seeing service needs is the school system. And we talked a little bit earlier tonight about the fact that I will credit, I will agree the numbers are staggering when you listen to the families that are coming here seeking shelter. One of the differences last summer versus 8 years ago, the town was contacted early by the state, and they wanted to know what grade levels had what sort of capacity. That was a complete difference from the prior cycle in 2014-15. I can recall times in 2015 when Senior Director Pam Parkinson and I would be finding out in December what the head count in the hotels was in October. So we were getting numbers that were 2 months stale. In this case, the state reached out proactively and said, we don't want to send families that have kids in grades where you're already over capacity. So there was, I think it was a more thoughtful approach. And as I noted, so we do have students in all of our grade levels. The schools are doing their best to integrate these kids into curriculum and make sure that they feel like they're part of the school community. But as I mentioned, all of the costs associated with teaching those kids is being reimbursed by the state. So, and that's $105 per student per day, and it's based on several touch points throughout the year. I believe December 1st was the last time that they looked at the rolls.
Just in closing, I don't want to suggest that we don't show empathy to people in need, but this is way out there in terms of, you know, the numbers of people. It's almost as if it's an invasion of our country. It's just, I think it's just a failure of Congress to institute a comprehensive immigration bill, and you know, as a result, the entire country is being impacted. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. Maureen, closing?
Thank you, David. Yeah, just a couple of things. I'm going to piggyback on Select Board Member Duggan, what he's talking about. Look, right, we want to have empathy for the families and for the children. We don't want to take anything out on the children. But I guess, Mike, I'm going to direct the question to the town manager, because I know of some instances where the children are coming to our school, and we want them to. We want to be able to teach them, but they're coming that they're not speaking English, and it's distracting. I've got some calls from some parents that it's distracting other students. Has Dan, the superintendent of schools, or yourself maybe spoken about maybe having certain classrooms for the kids that don't speak English, or, you know, English is their second language, to help them? You know, we don't want to see these, we talk about classroom size, you know, 17, 18, 22 kids, and then get in a few more. Like Matt says, you know, we want to take care of our own. We want to take care of really everybody. I'm for everybody, but I don't want to see it being taken away from the kids in our school here, the kids that go to school here, that live here. You know, we hope these kids that do come here stay here, but is that being addressed in the school system? Like, are they thinking about coming up with a plan? Because I do know that for a fact, that
I will say
some other students are suffering from
I will
that,
say two
too.
things. I will say I know that there are wild allegations and accusations on Facebook about all kinds of things that are happening or not
Oh, I'm
happening
not
in the
even
schools.
referring to that, yeah.
What I will say is that Dan Bauer and his team are doing their level best to educate and support the kids who are here through no choice of their own. And I think that Mary Wormers and her curriculum team are working incredibly hard to make sure that staff resources are in the right places to support kids. I would note that there are plenty of Massachusetts residents who don't speak English as their first language. So non-English speakers is not a new phenomenon in our schools. It's been here for a long time. But that's really a school committee question. I know Dan is working incredibly hard to try to support every kid who's in our school system.
So we can say to since we're on TV, if parents have any concerns, that they can reach out to their superintendent of schools.
Absolutely.
Right, at any time, okay. So that was, I just wanted to piggyback on that. I'd like to ask the clerk maybe to provide an update on the upcoming elections. If she could, you know, that would be great. And then I'd like to just circle back on my closing comments.
Can you speak to, summarize
I
the
can.
election
Sure.
schedule?
So nomination papers were made available in our office on February 1st. If anybody is interested in any of the positions as posted on the website, feel free to come in, sit down, talk to me. I'm happy to go over all of that with you. And then just a little side note on the vote by mail, we so far have sent out 2,904 for the March 5th primary, and we have 2667 for requests for the annual town election. So we're kind of trying to keep up with all of that. So ballots have gone out, they're starting to come back, cards are coming back, ballots are going out, so we have a lot going on.
Wow, thank you, Kathy.
Yes.
I just want to thank the town clerk and also the town moderator, too, for last night's meeting. I think it went fairly well. 116 members, I think, Gardner, you said. I think there's, a total of 149. It's too bad that not all the members came, because there's, it's very important, as I've said before, that town meeting members do represent the residents of the town and the voters. So it's important that if they can show up, that would be great. And I just wanted to say thank you. It went smoothly. I think some points were well taken. I want to thank the citizens petition, Mr. Bean for grabbing all those signatures about the trash fee. And I think it sent a message to people that a lot of people, I think if you listen to what he said, some people didn't even know about it. So I love the transparency. I love how the town manager had called us about the incident with the what was happening at Newbury Street. And I want to thank the police department and all the responders, the fire, police, state police, everybody for doing a terrific job. And I think that's about it. I want to say one more thing, too, that they're still selling the books for the Friends of Endicott Park. And they fixed, I think there was an error in one of the books. There was a typo. But they were having some signings. Some of the rangers were signing, and the people that illustrated the book, they were having a signing. I think it might be this Sunday. But, get in touch with Endicott, Friends of Endicott Park, if you want to get a book. It's a cute little book for the children. And that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Gardner, did you have?
Just a couple of brief things. One is, as others have said, I had an opportunity to speak to the chief of police today on a different matter. And while I was talking to him, I did want to say how much I appreciate the professionalism and ask him to pass that on to the fire as well. It's tragic that it happens. Crime happens everywhere, but it's how we rise to the occasion that matters, and they certainly showed why we're so proud of them and their accreditation over so many years. So I also want to thank the town meeting members for participation last night, and I want the town moderator to not feel bad. I know she's taking this personally. Mistakes happen, and I hope that the town meeting members will show the courtesy of being able to come out on the new date for the short meeting. And knowing them, I understand they're going to understand that this is just a mistake that we have to clarify so we can keep moving forward with those decisions they made. So I hope she isn't beating herself up too much and go with that. Other than that, I haven't received any emails that other members haven't received, and so I think I'm all done. Thank you.
Thank you, Gardner. Dan, I have no closing comments, so you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given the time and the length we've been here, I'm going to be very brief. In our annual report, there's a description of the Board of Health, which says promote public health, investigate health environmental problems. And in the letter from the Board of Health that the director sent out to the town manager regarding the polyurethane, while it's likely harmful to the environment, however, it is not an environmental health issue that local boards of health and staff typically focus on. So to my way of thinking, it's not consistent with what the description is. And I'd like permission, Mr. Chairman, to talk to the manager, because the Board of Health is appointed by the manager, just what this means and what actually, who looks at environmental problems in the town, if that's okay. And Steve, if we can meet on that subject, and then we can discuss it in public at a later date. And with that, please, folks, when you see a veteran, thank them for his or her service, and I'm all set, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dan. Do we need a vote to adjourn, or
Up to you.
do whatever? Is there
You want a motion?
Yes.
A motion to adjourn.
Okay, I don't want to get blamed for anything. It's a second. All in favor? Concluded. We are out of here. Unanimous.
No.